Andrew's music. Our Father and our God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy holy and matchless name. This morning, God, we just want to express our gratitude for life, for your protection, for your provision. Dear God, this morning, as we are gathered here for the continuation of this roadshow, we ask for special blessing on today's proceedings. May everything, dear God, be done to your name's honor and glory. And help all of us as participants, dear God, that we would truly appreciate what is being presented and we would be able to learn something new. And even for each facilitator or presenter, dear God, we place them in your hands this morning. And we ask, dear Father, that they will be able to do their task smoothly. And at the end, dear Father, total objective would be achieved. So we bless you and we praise you and we glorify you because you're awesome and you're wonderful. In Jesus' name we pray thanksgiving. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Samantha. I don't see, you can take your seats. I don't see the person who sang for us yesterday, but I understand that all public servants are good singers. So I have my eye on Simone, who's trying to run away and hide. Maybe we should ask her to come and sing an opening song or something. Simone? I'm only joking. With Samantha. No. So welcome back, everybody, to day 2 of our St. Vincent and the Grenadines ICT Roadshow after a fantastic day yesterday. I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for your engagement, your participation. And I think it was clear based on all of the questions that we heard yesterday that you got tremendous value from our discussions and the information that was presented, particularly on the digital transformation project that's taking place here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, the thing about it is all of those nice things that we heard about yesterday are actually going to be built on the platform of the internet. There must be a single, stable, open, and secure internet for us to be able to do all of those fantastic things that we heard about yesterday. Accessing government services, the single window for accessing the various services that are available, all of the communication, the financial services, everything almost that we spoke about yesterday is actually built on the platform of the internet. So today, what we are going to do is learn a little bit about one of the organizations that plays a very important role in ensuring that when you wake up in the morning and you reach for that mobile phone and you go into WhatsApp, that WhatsApp actually works because the internet is working. And the organization that I'm referring to is the one that I work for, ICANN, ICANN. 2 N's, one for numbers and one for names. So at this point, I really would like to recognize 2 important visitors to St. Vincent. I think they're both here for the first time. Well, I'll start with Nicholas Antoniello, who is one of our senior engineers at ICANN. So you have him with you. He doesn't often come to these parts. Those of you who are network operators, technicians, and so on, he can answer all of the questions that you have with regard to the internet. I just put you on the spot there. He says more or less. All right, so he's coming for the first time. When we went to pick him up at the hotel this morning, he wasn't ready. He didn't want to leave the hotel because the view was so nice and everything. So it seems like he's having a good time. And of course, you will soon hear from my boss, Rodrigo de la Parra, who I will formally introduce in just a minute. So the first thing that I'd like to do is just run through the program that we will cover today. Rodrigo is going to have a little conversation with you to explain a little bit about why you should pay attention to what is going on with ICANN and in ICANN. And after Rodrigo is finished, I will speak for a little bit and give you a sense of how ICANN is structured. What are the different parts of ICANN and where do you fit in? And when I say you, I mean you as a technician, you as an engineer, you as somebody with the police service, you as a nurse, you also as a nurse, because I know we have 2 nurses here, 1 male, 1 female, business people, financial officers, business executives. There is a place in ICANN for every type of stakeholder especially, government representatives and so on. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll also talk about the ICANN meetings that we have in the different parts of the world and how you can apply to be part of a program where ICANN will cover the cost of your participation in the meeting. So you'll hear about that. And then we'll have a question and answer period followed by a short break. And afterwards, we will hear from Nicholas Antoniello, who will be speaking about an important concept called universal acceptance. This is a concept that's very important to developers, software developers, web developers, and those who are running systems that will be used by persons outside of the Caribbean who don't use the letters and numbers that we use. So Nicholas will be telling us about that. There's also a universal acceptance ambassador program, and one of your very own, Chrislyn Goldberg, who is a local developer here. I think she has a banner, yes. EK Apps, please take a picture of that banner and visit her website. Because the local developers are very important to what's going on. And she would be talking about the Universal Acceptance Program. Then we will hear from Nicholas again, and also Dr. Claire Craig, who will tell us about how end users can participate within the whole ICANN structure. And it would be interesting to hear a little bit about Claire's journey, where she started in ICANN, what her progress was at the different stages, and where she is now. So it'll give you a sense of what your journey in ICANN could be in terms of possibilities. And then finally, we'll summarize the day, and then we'll have lunch. And I would allow you to get the second half of your day back. So that will be our program for today. And what I will do now is just recognize one additional traveler to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He's a regular traveler. I don't think that is his first trip. He's a very good colleague and close friend of ICANN, he's with Caribnog, with IXPs. He's done so much all over the Caribbean, and I speak of none other than my colleague. I call him His Excellency, and he doesn't always appreciate that, but I will call him my friend Bevel Wooding with Caribnog. Please give him a round of applause. Bevel has done a tremendous amount of work in terms of development for information and communication technologies in the Caribbean. He is representing an organization that you'll hear a little bit more about named Caribnog, the Caribbean Association of Network Operators, the Network Operators Group. And Caribnog is actually going to be facilitating tomorrow's technical forum, where we are expecting to see engineers and technicians and anyone who has an interest in finding out a little bit about the technical aspects and the technical issues that we want to be discussing. So that is where we are for this morning. And unless there are any questions, do I see any hands? Do we have any questions before the first presentation? I don't see any. So I will now introduce Rodrigo de la Parra, and we will get right into the first session. So Rodrigo de la Parra is a leading voice and advocate for the multi-stakeholder internet governance model in Latin America and the Caribbean. Rodrigo is the regional vice president for ICANN, and he's based in Mexico, a very long way away from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but he travels frequently through the region. Rodrigo is responsible for outreach, support, and engagement with user groups, governments, the private sector, civil society throughout our diverse region in Latin America and the Caribbean. And he continues to help build a robust internet infrastructure in the region. And under his leadership, ICANN has opened an engagement center in Montevideo, Uruguay, in what we call La Casa de Internet, the House of the Internet. Rodrigo has over 20 years of experience as a multicultural executive, and he has worked as a regulator and as Director General for International Corporation of Mexico's Federal Commission of Telecommunications before joining the knowledge of internet governance structures and ICT to help public policy and regulation recommendations for new technologies. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to invite you to welcome my boss, Rodrigo de la Parra, Vice President for Latin America and the Caribbean, who will be having a little conversation with us.
Thank you very much, Albert, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk down here. I think it's better. We are the right size of the audience to have a more intimate conversation about this. So once again, thanks for having us. First time here in St. Vincent. And we were talking with Nicolas and Albert and Claire and our colleagues that we really need to come back with our families for a vacation. Unfortunately, we're leaving tomorrow very early, but from the way to the hotel to the venue, we were just invited to come. So we need another excuse to be here, so probably hope you like the presentation. As Albert mentioned, he's going to go into detail about ICANN and the structures, and you will understand more about this organization. But what I'm trying to do now is to explain to you a little bit of what is that we are doing here and what is the interest of ICANN of reaching out to different audiences and different countries and invite them to participate in our model and our organization. Many of you perhaps are suspecting, as you know, when people invite you to participate in things, that there are small letters in the contract and you will need to pay something. Why these people are here, they want something from us, and certainly we want something from you, but it has nothing to do with any expenditure or being part of this cult. It's really about other things, really important for ICANN to work. And let me start by reflecting a little bit about the internet. What is the internet? Albert made this mention about how we use the internet in our everyday lives, when we wake up in the morning and when we go back to sleep. We use it every time. And for all of us that are not that young, we have been witnessing the development of the internet and how it really has become something that nowadays is just seamlessly for every digital native folks, the young people. They do not know about how it was to get a connection with a modem and a DSL technology, and how hard it was to get just to send an email, a few bytes there. Now they just sit down, relax, watch a movie on a small device, and for us to get from where we were to where we are now, many things have happened. So in these new generations, they don't really get to understand the importance of the internet. Actually, I was in an event in Costa Rica a few weeks ago, and I was really surprised. This was a civil society event, so they were more worried about discussing all of the things that are happening on the internet, on top of the internet, that had to do more with with privacy or with human rights. But they don't talk about the internet anymore. They talk about the platforms, right? So one thing is, we need to reflect about, all that the internet allows, or all that the internet facilitates. So let it happen. Let happen, right? One way of understanding this, there's a lot of technical issues behind how the internet works, and Nico will guide us through that, I believe, today or tomorrow. But think about this table that we have here with us. As you can see, there are support the legs of the table. This might be the physical infrastructure of the internet, the wires, the cable, the submarine cables, even the wireless technologies, all of that supports the table. This infrastructure has been built for a long time for ICT companies, the incumbent carriers, the digital carriers. All of them is supporting that table. And then we have, this part of the table that can be thought as the logical layer. So this part of the internet, of this layer, it's part also of the infrastructure, but it's not the physical infrastructure or the telecom infrastructure. This is what we call the logical layer, and this is the layer where many of the organizations that are here work, like ICANN or ARIN or the CCTLDs. I will explain that now, but the country code top level domains. And this layer is what makes that all of these networks that are supporting the table, right, look just like one single network, which is the internet. Because all of these networks existed before the internet, and they interconnected amongst themselves. They had some, arrangements, interconnection arrangements, and they managed how to charge each other, and they also managed to do that international. But the internet, and the beauty of the internet, or one of the beauties of the internet, is that for you and for me, regardless of where we are, it only looks like one single net. You may have heard of the concept, the network of networks. We can think about the largest network, but it's really about making all of these networks, which are close to 100,000 networks around the world, look like just one. And hence the importance of ICANN, and we will get there. But the flowers here, it's what happens on top of the internet. The flowers are really, the applications, the social media, Facebook, Google, all of these things happen on the internet. This is a simplified version, but it's important to realize this, because sometimes when we're saying, well, the internet's gone, what part of the internet's gone? Maybe it's a problem of the flowers, maybe it's a problem of the legs supporting the table, or maybe it's the table, the board table itself. So of course, for all of you that are engineers, there is a more complex way of explaining the different layers of the internet, but this is very helpful to give you a picture of what is the internet, what happens on the internet, and like that. So ICANN, as Albert will explain in a minute, it's about names and numbers, right? And names and numbers, we call them the unique identifiers of the internet, because this is really what the networks need to understand, that they are just in one network. So they need to have, a unique definition of the numbers. Think about telephone numbers. So telephone numbers, they have a particular length. They are managed by a national regulator, typically. They make the numbering and fundamental plan. They will allocate blocks of numbers to the different carriers and operators, which in turn they will assign those to the users. For the internet, we are referring to the infamous IP addresses, or internet protocol addresses. And this is a global resource. So it's managed at global level by an organization called ICANN. So ICANN has the global pool of addresses, of IP addresses, and then ICANN allocates these addresses to 5 different RIRs. RIRs are regional internet registries, and are based, we have one for North America, which is ARIN. We have LACNIC for Latin America and the Caribbean. ARIN also serves some countries in the Caribbean, including St. Vincent. Then we have one for Africa, AFRINIC, and we have one for Asia Pacific, APNIC. And then I'm missing the European one, RIPE, serves Europe. Then these regional internet registries will allocate the IP addresses blocks to their own operators, network operators, and then they will assign these to you and me as users of the internet. So more or less, that's how this layer works and what is the importance of that. So these definitions of names and numbers need to be very, they are key and instrumental for making, as we say in our motto at ICANN, is one world, one internet. Because the real power of the internet is for it to become and to stay, right, as it is, an open and global network. This is what allows you to, go into content and information from any part of the world. You can produce the content, you can be a consumer of this content, you can send lots of information and then transform that into knowledge, and this is the real power of the internet. So, as you might have heard, one of the biggest threats of the internet now is fragmentation, because when fragmentation of the internet happens, then the internet will continue to look as 100,000 different networks that whenever they want to interconnect to each other, they have to pay interconnection fees, interconnection rates, and that's a thing of the past now. It still happens and needs to continue to happen, but we're not talking about voice communications anymore. We are talking about data and applications, and now we're even talking about artificial intelligence and all of the things that happen in the internet. So trying to answer the question of why we're here and why you should be involved in all of this, it may sound a little bit foreign to begin with. It would sound a little bit like, okay, so how can we contribute to this world peace? No? It's as an individual, it just seems so far away and so distant from our own contribution. But let me tell you about the internet. The internet, and this I'm going to quote some of our colleagues in the ICANN community. They've called the internet one of the largest collaborative invention in humankind. They've also called the internet a peace project, right? Like all of these things, and I think they're probably right. If you look about how the internet has transformed our lives and the world in general, it was really amazing. I think the pandemic was really a testament to this, right? What would have happened to all of us if we didn't have the internet and we were asked to go and stay at our houses, our homes? Again, what would have happened with business, with education? The kids will just have to stop going to school. So if you close your eyes a little bit and imagine a world without the internet, I think it will be hard to imagine now. And one of the things, one of the foundations of the internet, one of the characteristics of the internet was when I say the greatest collaborative invention in humankind, I will try to underline collaboration and coordination. This was a key feature of the internet, and it's really true. The internet works not only because ICANN exists, or because the RIRs exist, or the CCTLDs exist, or the interconnection exchange points, or the ICT carriers, or the mobile carriers, or the regulator, the ministries. So this is really about everybody getting together and making this platform work. There is a lot of people involved in that, and the beauty of it is that there is no one, conductor, right? Like in music in an orchestra, teaching everybody or showing all of them how to play the song. Everybody has their own role and their own responsibility. So I remember, as Albert mentioned, before joining ICANN, I was working for the government in Mexico, the Federal Telecommunications Commission, and we started this liberalization process and privatization process of the Mexican carrier, the incumbent, Telmex at that time, and it yielded some good results. I think it was a good strategy. New carriers came into the market, quality improved, the rates went down. But at the same time, the internet was emerging. This was late 90s. And people started to ask, are you going to include the internet as part of the regulation of what you do on a day-to-day basis? And the consensus, not only in Mexico, but worldwide was not to regulate the internet at all, because nobody knew what was going to happen. I mean, 1990s is not that far away, but in internet times, it was like prehistory. it's a long time ago. So they would say, no, let's not regulate it because it's flourishing. It was very promising. And it hasn't been centrally promoted by any government or by any organization for that matter. And it was not, of course, regulated, right? So we should keep it that way. So we and many of the governments working in the International Telecommunications Union and other fora around the world had an educated decision, I would say, not to regulate the internet. Then, discussions started because some other governments thinking, well, and who is behind this? I mean, you cannot come and tell me that this is only self-regulated out of nothing. There will be anarchy because as the internet became more in use, more sensitive information was being carried over the internet. They were starting to have some issues about privacy, some issues about security. So there was a whole discussion about how to govern the internet. So this is where the concept of internet governance first emerged in 2003 and 2005 in a summit called by the International Telecommunications Union of the UN, the United Nations. The World Information Society, the World Summit on the Information Society, many of you might remember this. I was back then part of the delegation, but this is of the Mexican government delegation. But this is where the real debate happened about internet governance. People start to ask, what is the internet? Who governs the internet and how it should be managed, right? And ICANN was at the, forefront of the discussion, not because ICANN was running the internet, because it was one of the very few organizations with a global function and responsibility that people could call in to the discussion to ask them how they were doing things and who were they accountable to. ICANN, when we started back in 1998, this year we are turning 25 years. It was when the Clinton administration of the US, because the US government, as many of you may know, was in charge of handling the administration of these unique identifiers, right? The names and numbers. And they are public papers, and there's actually a good source that we might send to you. It's called the ICANN History Project, when you can hear from the people and the government of the Clinton administration and other internet pioneers discussing this decision that the government of the United States shouldn't be the one taking care of this function. And it was themselves that think, well, the internet is growing at such a fast pace and it's becoming really, really global. And the value of the internet is really what's happening, not at the network layer, but what's happening at the edges of the internet, right? So each additional user of the internet could potentially, and you have heard, of course, that before, could become the new Google or the new Facebook or the new, now they call it unicorns, right? When they are, but this is true, right? This is true because you have the same access to the same audience in any part of so they say, we are managing this important part of the network, we shouldn't be doing this on our own. So that's when they created ICANN. The idea of creating ICANN was to have, on one hand, an organization that is global, and another important thing, which is the one that I will now land on what I'm trying to tell you, is that it's multi-stakeholder. Multi-stakeholder, it means that, in simple terms, that everybody and every stakeholder group or every organization should have a seat and could have a seat in the decision making of this. Because, and it's not just only about providing the organization or internet governance with legitimacy. It is really because all of us, the government, the private sector, the civil society, and the technical community, we all need each other in order for us to, help the internet stay as it is, open, transparent, secure, interoperable, and one internet. So the public sector and the government, of course, they will make sure that the public interest is being followed. The technical community will make sure that the internet doesn't break, that it works well, effectively, that stays on. The civil society and end users, and Claire here will tell us more about that, but they will make sure that whatever decisions are being taken in the internet in general and in ICANN in particular consider the end user interest in this, and so forth, private sector, and all of them that were invited. And this is happening. This is happening at ICANN. It happened when it started. You know, it evolved. The government of the US created ICANN with a contract. Many of the governments were not happy about ICANN having a contract with the Department of Commerce of the US. And some years ago, 2014, the ICANN community ended this contract with the US. The US government, of course, accepted that this was required for the internet to be an ICANN and the DNS to be a trusted source. And then we are now a truly independent organization. But we are accountable to the global internet community. So this is why it is important that everybody in every country, in every sector, can participate and participates at ICANN. You know, I know this sounds like how we're going to do that, right? Albert will explain about the tools that we have to make engagement easier. But the objective of us doing these roadshows is to come to the different places in the world and tell you about these opportunities and get your involvement in these decisions. It's really critical and really important. And of course, you'll have examples closer to you of people that is already involved in these decision-making processes. It's really about making sure that your voice is being heard. ICANN, you know, at least on paper, well, definitely on paper, it's an open multi-stakeholder model, so you don't need to pay any fees to belong to this. Actually, we want you to come, and sometimes we will fund your participation to come and participate in ICANN public meetings. We are, of course, a non-for-profit organization, so for us, the importance is to build the multi-stakeholder model, because we have a place waiting for you. So if you look at the current map of multi-stakeholder participation, you can see, well, out of 200 governments in the world, we have now at ICANN's Government Advisory Committee close to 185 governments already. But we can see that we still have a gap, 15. Out of these 15 countries that we're missing, I think there are a couple of them, probably 3 of them in the Caribbean, 5 of them in the whole Latin American Caribbean region that's still not there. We have their seat reserved for them, and we are inviting them to participate. Well, same will happen with other organizations at ICANN or groups. There will be civil society organizations that will need and have a reserved seat for you, for your organization to be there and participate in the decision-making of the DNS. Believe me, if you don't go there, people are participating in ICANN 25 years ago, and they are making decisions every year, every time about relevant aspects of the internet. And that's fine, it's been working well. But we, and my job as an ICANN regional vice president is making sure that in this region, in the Caribbean and in Latin America, we have a meaningful participation of government, civil society, and private sector to have our voice heard, no, and have our realities captured, and making sure that these decisions are aligned with our needs, being part of the discussion. So this is why we are here. Thank you very much for having us. I hope you have interest in participating with ICANN. You will hear from Albert about good opportunities to be part of this community. And with that, I'll thank you very much for your attention. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. And it's not often that we get a regional vice president to come all the way down to the Caribbean. Rodrigo has been a few times to the Caribbean, but I think it is an indication of how important countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines are to ICANN, that we have the most senior person on the team fly all the way across here. I think he came from Mexico this time. Yeah. So he came all the way from Mexico to be with us, to share with you. And I saw you listening carefully, and I saw your faces when he said to you, and we had this question asked by Simone yesterday, how would you feel if you woke up in the morning and the internet was not working? And there was silence. What would you do with the kids? Okay? So it's not a reality. It's not a reality that we consider often, but it's a reality that brings us to the position where we realize we need to pay attention to what's happening in decision-making bodies like ICANN that determine the type of internet that we actually have. And he used that word multi-stakeholder. And this is what we started talking about yesterday. I said to you, when I came to the room, I saw a nurse sitting down there, and I thought I was in the wrong room, not realizing that she is as much and he is as much, a part of this multi-stakeholder community that can work together to make decisions that will determine the type of internet that we actually have. And another important word that Rodrigo mentioned was collaboration. The internet was built on collaboration. What is the internet? It's Nicholas's network connected to Albert's network, connected to a network in St. Vincent, connected to Bevel's network. Everybody collaborating. And the administration of the internet is also a collaborative effort as well. And this is why we need to understand, how do we collaborate? How do we participate with each other? And I'll just ask the technicians to bring my presentation up. But while they're doing that, I just want you to reflect on something. Rodrigo said we have to be careful about the internet not getting fragmented and not breaking. If we remember during COVID, did the internet break during COVID for anybody? It may have been a little bit slower, but it still worked. And that is testament to the work that takes place inside ICANN. And the work inside ICANN, as you will understand in a minute, is not just the work of ICANN staff like Rodrigo, Nicholas, and myself, and all of our other approximately 450 colleagues, but it is a collaborative effort of ICANN staff as well as stakeholders from the community. And the internet did not break because stakeholders like you paid attention to making sure that there were proper policies and proper structures and proper administration to ensure that when we woke up in the morning and we reached for that phone, that everything worked as we expected. So ladies and gentlemen, please give Rodrigo de la Parra another huge round of applause for coming to share with us, his views on why you should pay attention to what's happening at ICANN. So what I will attempt to do over the next couple of minutes is drill down a little bit deeper into these topics. I will go into a little bit more detail about what ICANN is, and you will learn that ICANN is not just the organization ICANN, but it is something else which I will explain. A lot of what happens in ICANN is referred to as multi-stakeholder policy development, so we will speak a little bit about that, and I will give you a very real and tangible example of how the efforts of persons like yourself in the ICANN community actually made a very big change to the internet that we have now. And I'll explain to you what that is. The example will be the new generic top-level domain names. Very importantly, I'll explain to you how you can get involved in what's happening at ICANN. I'll tell you about our public meetings. Rodrigo mentioned that we have these public meetings every year. There are several people in this room who have been to public meetings. I know Nicholas and Rodrigo and myself have been, but this gentleman over here, Bevel, has been to an ICANN public meeting. I see Roxanne at the back, she's been. Claire, for sure, is putting up two hands because she goes to more ICANN meetings than I go to, even as an ICANN staff member. And I will explain to you how that could be you going to more ICANN meetings than ICANN staff. So there are these public meetings that we have, and I'll explain to you how you can find out more about them, how you can go to them, and how you can prepare to actually attend these public meetings. And then finally, I'll introduce you to something called I Can Learn, where you can learn much more about what happens in the different parts of ICANN. So let's jump right into it. The first thing that we need to understand is these two N's that we have in the name ICANN, I-C-A-N-N. One N is for names, one N is for numbers. Every single device, and there are many in here, and usually in a home you have more devices than you have people, and every single one of those devices has a unique identifier, which is an IP address. I'm sure some of you who dabble with setting up the routers may have seen numbers like 192.168, something like that. Those are called the IP addresses, and every device must have one of those. So one of the things that ICANN does, the ICANN staff, is they coordinate all of those numbers for the entire globe. So I see my friend here from Digicel. Is there anybody here from Flow? I didn't see anybody from Flow yesterday. Any hands going up for Flow? Well, I'm sure somebody will send a WhatsApp to Flow and tell them that they need to come into the room to be represented. But when you get a mobile phone from Digicel, and I'm mentioning Digicel because they're here in the room, when Flow comes, I'll mention them, that device gets an IP address. So Digicel has this big, as well as Flow, they have these pools of IP addresses that they get from ICANN, and then they distribute those addresses to you for your smart TVs, for your smartphones, and security cameras, and so on. In addition to that, when we communicate over the internet, what do we use? How do we send messages? How do we communicate with each other? Anybody can tell me? The keyboard, and what do we do on the keyboard? We type, what do we type? We type letters. Yeah, we type numbers, but how do we know who to send the email to? Where do we send it? To an email address, okay? All of us have email addresses, and those email addresses might be something that ends in gmail.com or gov.vc, and those are also a set of unique identifiers. And the ICANN organization also manages those unique identifiers at the top level. So .com, .org, .edu, .vc, the ICANN organization also manages all of those. So this is what we speak about when we say that the ICANN organization manages the unique identifiers on the internet, and this is what allows the internet to work. So if I want to send an email to Bevel, I will type in bevel@arin.net, and that assures me that the message that I'm sending to Bevel will get to Bevel and not to my nemesis at the back there, Rudy Daniel, okay? Because we don't want any of my emails to go to Rudy. I don't want Rudy to know what's happening. So I have to make sure that I use the unique identifier for Bevel, which is the email address, so that the email gets to the right person that we want. And it's not trivial. Can you imagine what would happen if all of a sudden, when we were sending out our WhatsApp messages, they were going to the wrong person? Can you imagine? You want to send your husband or your wife or your partner something private, and next thing you know, again, my friend at the back there, Rudy, gets all of those messages? It wouldn't end well, right? It wouldn't end well at all. And this is why the unique identifiers are important. Now, here's the thing. We have IPv4 addresses, the ones that we can remember, 192.168.whatever, 1.1. But nowadays we have the much longer IP addresses, which are what we call IP version 6. And I wouldn't even try to attempt, repeating one of those. I see somebody laughing at the back because you've seen them. There's some far more complicated addresses. We can't remember them. But we can easily remember gmail.com and facebook.com. This is why we need both the names and the numbers. So the devices have the numbers, which we don't remember well, but we as human beings will use the names, which we remember easily. And then there must be that translation from names into numbers. When you type gmail.com, there is actually a system called the DNS the domain name system which will do that translation. And that is an area where ICANN pays a tremendous amount of attention in ensuring that that domain name system works as it should. So ICANN does its part, which is dealing with the names and numbers, and also another group of technical identifiers called protocol parameters. We won't get into that today. But more importantly, it's a collaborative effort. The ICANN organization works with the Internet Engineering Task Force. It works with companies like ARIN, the American Registry for Internet Numbers, which gives numbers to the English-speaking Caribbean. It works with LACNIC, which gives numbers to Latin America and certain other parts of the Caribbean, and several other organizations. And this is why Rodrigo said that there is no single organization that controls the entire Internet. It is a collaborative effort. ICANN does its job, ARIN does its job, LACNIC does its job, the Internet Society does certain things, and we all work together to make sure that everything works in the way it should. So we have our technical partners, which are some of those that I just mentioned, and we have other partners. Now this diagram up on the slide is a very important diagram for you to understand. It's what we refer to as the ICANN ecosystem, because thus far you may have the mistaken impression that ICANN is only an organization. ICANN is not only an organization. It is really an ecosystem that has three important parts. And believe it or not, you are the most important part of the ICANN ecosystem. The first part of the ICANN ecosystem is what we refer to as the multi-stakeholder community. Representatives from government, from the private sector, from civil society, from academia, everyone who has an interest in the internet working as it should. And these are the individuals who sit down at ICANN meetings and decide on the type of internet that you are going to be ending up with. So, believe it or not, it is people like you in this room who are the ones who determine whether or not we will get new top-level domain names, whether we will apply something called DNSSEC, which we will talk about. And it is not necessarily the ICANN staff who make those kinds of decisions. That is very important that you leave here with the understanding that you, the members of the global multi-stakeholder community, are the most important part of the ICANN ecosystem. Also in the ICANN ecosystem, there is an ICANN board of directors that makes the final decisions on ICANN policies, and that board itself is actually drawn from the multi-stakeholder community, from people with different backgrounds, different training, different certification, different parts of the world, male, female. There is tremendous amount of diversity, and once these people get appointed to the ICANN board, then they drop off their entire background and make decisions based on what is good for the internet community. So it's not because I come from St. Lucia or Bevel comes from Trinidad, if we get on the ICANN board, all of a sudden we make decisions that will benefit our countries. No. Persons on the ICANN board make decisions that benefit the global internet community. And after the board has taken a decision and come up with a new policy, only then does it go to the ICANN staff in the ICANN organization and say, well, look, this decision has been taken. The community has decided that we need some new generic top-level domain names. We now need you, ICANN staff, to implement this whole project of getting new top-level domain names. And that's when you get to what we call the ICANN organization, where the ICANN staff actually start getting involved. So that is the ICANN ecosystem. So sometimes people like my friend Rudy will do this and point at me and say, Albert, what is ICANN doing about this? And what I will say to Rudy, look at your hand. You have one finger pointing at me, but you have three fingers pointing back at yourself, because you are more ICANN than the ICANN staff. So as my father would say, put that in your pipe and smoke it, okay? Because it's very important that you realize that when decisions are being made on the internet, whatever is decided is your fault, okay? And you are the ones who should be there to be contributing to those decision making. So we'll look at this particular slide a little bit later on, but there's a whole process of making decisions at ICANN, which has various stages and where different parts of ICANN actually contribute. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So we've already heard of some of what ICANN does, but a very important part of the ICANN work is growing the multi-stakeholder community. It's explaining to you what actually happens in ICANN and why you should be involved, and getting you to understand that you need to attend an ICANN meeting either in person or actually remotely. This diagram just gives you a sense of how ICANN distributes those IP addresses. This would be of interest maybe to our network administrators and the internet service providers. The world is divided into 5 different regions, and the different regional internet registries, ARIN, LACNIC, AFRINIC, RIPE, and APNIC, are the ones that get IP addresses from ICANN, and they redistribute through the ISP so that eventually you get an IP address on your device. So we've heard a little bit about what ICANN does. We ensure the stable and secure operation of the internet's unique system of identifiers, and we do that based on certain core values: stability, security, resiliency, and openness. Very importantly, at ICANN, things work a little bit differently than they do in other organizations. Anybody here has heard about an organization like, for example, the Internet, the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union? Hands up, anybody who has heard about the ITU. Yeah, I see a few hands going up. Rodrigo knows it very well. Typically at the ITU and at places like CARICOM and so on, it is a top-down approach to decision making. You have your representatives of governments, they have discussions, and then those decisions eventually filter down. What happens in ICANN is the reverse. And now you understand that when I say ICANN, I'm talking about the ICANN community. What happens in the ICANN community is you don't have persons at the top like Rodrigo and so on taking decisions and decisions being filtered down. What you have is individuals like yourself identifying issues and then raising those issues as issues that need to be addressed, and then individuals like yourself coming together in a working group to discuss new policies, and then everything filtering up. So the multi-stakeholder model works in an open and transparent way, but it works in a bottoms-up way. And the way ICANN operates as well is with high levels of professionalism, efficiency, and excellence. We have several offices located in different parts of the globe. You just heard a few minutes ago that Rodrigo de la Parra was instrumental in setting up the office for Latin America and the Caribbean in Montevideo, Uruguay. And if you look at this slide, you'll see those yellow dots, which indicate where we have offices all over the world. Now, let's talk for a bit about the multi-stakeholder model. In the multi-stakeholder model, you have individuals who are primarily volunteers. Nobody gets paid for policy development work that takes place at ICANN. You can offer yourself as a volunteer to be on a working group to discuss issues, and the whole thing takes place on a volunteer basis. And in the multi-stakeholder community, we have 2 types of entities that actually are involved in developing policy. We have what are referred to as supporting organizations on the one hand, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and we have advisory committees that advise the board on what's going on. So in the multi-stakeholder community, we have individuals from varying backgrounds: academics, technical persons, business persons, network operators, engineers, and all of them actually contribute to policy development. And the multi-stakeholder model works by developing, first of all, identifying an area where policy needs to be developed, getting the working group together, and then having discussions which are facilitated by ICANN staff. So ICANN staff will organize the meetings, get the building, get the internet working, so that you, the individuals, can actually develop and refine policy. So this is where we now start talking about where you fit in, coming from your different backgrounds, into the ICANN structure. We have supporting organizations and advisory committees. There are 3 supporting organizations, and one thing you will realize is that when you get to ICANN, we start speaking a different language to English. When I went into, some of you are smiling because I think you've heard some of these terms. When I went to my first ICANN meeting and I walked into the room, I thought I was this big hotshot, computer technician, Microsoft certified. Let me go and see what these people are doing, but I know all of it already. And I walked into a room at an ICANN meeting, and I heard somebody stand up and say, the CCNSO is considering a PDP on IDNs, and it has to be discussed with the GAC and the ESAC. I held my head. Now, at ICANN meetings, we have exceptional translation. You have these interpreters at the back of the room. So you know what I did? I went back to the entrance, and I picked up the headphones, because these people could not have been speaking English, right? It must be some other language. And I put on the headphones, and I realized I still couldn't understand what was being said, only to realize that they were actually speaking English, but they were speaking in acronyms. So Simone, prepare yourself for your first ICANN meeting. When you get there, you need to learn some of these acronyms. So there are a few acronyms here, but what you will realize is that after a while, it's easier to talk about the ASO than to talk about the address supporting organization. It's easier to talk about the CCNSO than to talk about the country code name supporting organization. It's easier to talk about a PDP than to say policy development process 20 times. So don't get fearful about the acronyms that we may come across. We have an acronym buster on the ICANN website, and we are always there, as ICANN staff to help you understand. But coming back to the supporting organizations, we call them SOs. So we hardly ever say supporting organizations. But there are 3 SOs. The first one is the address supporting organization, which deals with global policy concerning the numbers that we spoke about. There's another important one, particularly to countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, called the CCNSO, the Country Code Name Supporting Organization. Can anybody tell me what the country code is for St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Not Rudy. VC, okay. You heard that, Rudy? The country for St. Vincent and the Grenadines is .vc. And every country of the Caribbean has its own CCTLD. Does anybody know any other CCTLDs for other countries? Shout it out loud. .jm for Jamaica. Are you from Jamaica by any chance? There you go. .jm for Jamaica. What else? GD for Grenada. TT for Trinidad and Tobago. So and there are many others. The whole idea is that these country code top-level domain names were established to give each country in the world their own place on the internet. And those are actually top-level domain names. So there is a supporting organization that deals with policy that's developed for country codes, and it's referred to as the CCNSO. Similarly, there is a GNSO, and the GNSO deals with policies that relate to the generic top-level domain names. Give me some examples of generic top-level domain names. .com, what else? .net, .org, and so on. And as you'll see in one of my slides, because of what you decided in the ICANN multi-stakeholder community, there are now over 1,200 new generic top-level domain names that you can actually have access to, like .education, .academics, .hotels, and so on. So there is a structure within ICANN called the GNSO that deals with policy that is developed for those different areas. Now, while the policy is being developed, remember I told you there was an ICANN board. While the policy is developed, there are different parts of the community that is giving the board advice on how those policies will affect the internet. For example, representatives of governments will be advising the ICANN board on the impact of a particular policy when it intersects with national laws and national regulations. So the Government Advisory Committee, the GAC, is the place in ICANN where the representatives of governments actually have their discussions. Another very important grouping is the grouping of end users, which is represented by what we call at large, the ALAC. And this is where your Internet Society chapter and all of its members have a voice in what actually happens in the ICANN community. When ICANN meetings actually take place, somebody will have to help me with this. When ICANN meetings actually take place, what happens is that all of these representatives will go to the meeting and give their viewpoint on whatever is being discussed so that the final decision incorporates input from the end users. Now, here's the rub. If you as St. Vincent end users do not go to an ICANN meeting and do not actually let your voice be heard, then what's going to happen is that the decisions that are taken will not take into consideration the position of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This is why it's critically important what Roxanne is doing and what Simone and others are doing with your Internet Society chapter, where they are mobilizing the voices of end users to actually make input into ICANN policies. So you have all of those advisory committees advising the board, and then we also have subdivisions of the different structures. I won't go into detail there. We already spoke about the CCNSO and the generic name supporting organization. Now, with the generic name supporting organization, we start seeing the different boxes that different types of users will fit into. For example, there are lots of intellectual property issues that are discussed on the internet, and there's a grouping known as the intellectual property constituency, where typically you will find many lawyers, many representatives of business who have an interest in what's happening with intellectual property, having discussions in here. You also have a constituency that's referred to as the business constituency. So those who represent companies that have a very serious stake in what happens with internet policy would find themselves in the business constituency having discussions. Digicel, do you notice that there is a constituency just for internet service providers? It's called the ISPCP, the Internet Service Provider and Connectivity Provider Constituency. And this is where every ISP, every network operator should have a representative, because this is where decisions are taken from the perspective of the operators. And of course, we have other stakeholders, but the point I wanted to make with this particular slide, without going into further detail, is that there is a space in ICANN for every government representative from every country, for every type of background, whether you're an end user, a technician, a business person, and so on. There is a space in ICANN for everyone. So I just wanted to talk for a minute or two about what we refer to as multi-stakeholder policy development. Because I said to you that you are the ones that make decisions with regard to what actually happens on the internet. When the internet started, we were in a situation where we only had a few top-level domain names. And you, the community, decided that, okay, .com, .org, .edu, .net, and .so on are not enough. We want more choice. We want more competition. We want an internet where if I want to go to a hotel, I should be able to go to a website that ends in .hotel. Or if I want to find out what IBM or BMW or Mercedes actually has available, their website should end in .Mercedes or .IBM or so on. So you as a community said that you wanted more competition, you wanted more choice. You said this in an ICANN meeting. ICANN staff organized meetings to allow you to discuss it further. And then we said, yes, we feel that this is something that could take some attention. So let's start a PDP. a policy development process on it, and it went all the way through to the board, where eventually the board decided that yes, it's a good idea. ICANN staff, I would now like you to put together a process for applying for new top-level domain names. And what did we end up with as a result? This is what we ended up with. We ended up with 1,200 new top-level domain names. I mean, take a look at this slide. Did any of you realize that we had all of these domains on the internet? .books, .online, .shop, .anything, .education, .music, .love. All of these are actually top-level generic names that exist on the internet right now that you can have as the top-level domain names for your website. .energy, .charity, .design. I mean, as a web designer, wouldn't you like to have a website ending in .design or .shop or .music? Lots of different top-level domain names are available. And the point I want to make here is that ICANN staff did not decide on this. This is you who decided on what's going on here. And you decided on those new top-level domain names by following this policy development process. Remember I told you you had these SOs, the supporting organizations, one for numbers, one for country codes, and one for generic names. So the generic name supporting organization started that policy development process in ICANN meetings. There were persons like yourselves at the ICANN meetings who were actually engaging in the discussions, and they were very there was a very open discussion. There was a report at the end of the discussion saying, well, this is the draft policy, and even if you did not attend an ICANN meeting, that draft policy would have been put to the community, and so that the community could make public comments. That is another way that you can participate in this process. At any time, anything that's been discussed in ICANN goes on the internet so that you from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, from Beckway, can sit at your house and actually make a public comment on something that is being proposed. So it's not Rodrigo, it's not Nicholas, it's not myself, it's not Bevel and others who decide what happens with the internet. It is you who decide what happens with the internet. And then, remember I told you you have all of these advisory committees, so then you get your GAC representative. I can see one GAC representative for St. Vincent and the Grenadines in this room. I wouldn't call the name. I mean, maybe we can have a treasure hunt to find out who is the GAC representative who is in the room right now. But while the discussion is going on, the GAC representatives, the government representatives advise the board, the security representatives advise the board, and the end users in the at-large, they also give advice to the board on whether or not this policy that's being discussed, makes sense and so on. So it's very important that you get involved. There are many ways to get involved, and if you answer yes to any of the questions that you see on this slide, then you should be at an ICANN meeting. So take a look at those questions, and if even just one of them gets you to a point where you give the answer of yes, then you should find out when ICANN meetings take place. You should try to go to an ICANN meeting. You should follow remotely if you can't go in person. You should pay attention to what's happening at ICANN. And there are different ways to get involved. This slide tells you how you can get involved. Of course, you can go to an ICANN public meeting wherever it's happening in the world. But more importantly, you can attend events like this that are happening here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, thanks to ICANN, thanks to the Internet Society, thanks to Caribnog. You can participate in your own country and learn about what's going on and attend events in your own region. Now, what are some of the issues being discussed in ICANN right now? Because I'm telling you all of this, but you need to find something that you can hook on to that is of importance to you. Are these new generic top-level domain names important to you? I don't know. Is ICANN's accountability and transparency to you important to you? I don't know. But if you are any kind of business that is operating on the internet, I will guarantee you that the multilingual internet is of importance to you. Why is it of importance to you? There's a $9.8 billion reason why you should pay attention to the multilingual internet if you have any kind of business. Why? There are 3.6 billion dollars which actually is going to be accessed based on existing users of the internet now starting to use the internet in their own language scripts. Indians in their script, Chinese in their script, Russians, persons from Saudi Arabia, all of them can now have email addresses and use the internet in their own language script. And when I say their own language script, you know what Chinese characters look like, right? That's what I mean, seeing an email address or website in those kinds of characters. $3.6 billion are available in a new market as a result of the multilingual internet. And similarly, in certain parts of the world, there are new users coming onto the internet because they can now come onto the internet in their own language. We were forcing them in the past to use the internet in English, but English was not their native language. We want them to come and stay at a hotel in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and enjoy Caribbean hospitality. They don't speak English, but we are forcing them to use the internet and read a website that is in English characters. Now with the multi-user internet, which Nicholas is going to be telling you about, universal acceptance and internationalized domain names, there is an additional $6.2 billion of market. And this was in 2017. This is an old slide. But back in 2017, this was the additional business opportunity as a result of the multilingual internet. So if you're not interested as a businessman in this kind of opportunity, well, I don't know what more to tell you. Now, this next section is where they say the rubber meets the road. We have 3 programs that can help you participate and get involved in ICANN. They are the fellowship program. By a show of hands, everybody in the room who is an ICANN fellow, please put up your hands. Claire Craig, ICANN fellows. ICANN fellows in the front row. Okay, he's putting up a little finger. Rudy, my good friend Rudy at the back is an ICANN fellow. I think Roxanne, were you an ICANN fellow at one point? Roxanne? No, but you got travel support to attend, I think, maybe on the GAC. So the ICANN Fellowship Program is a competitive global program which could result in ICANN paying your airfare and your accommodation to attend one of our public meetings. ICANN divides the globe into 5, North America and Canada, Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia Pacific, and Europe. And what we do with our public meetings is we rotate the place in the world where those meetings are taking place. The last meeting that we had took place in North America. It was in Washington, D.C. The next meeting that we're going to is going to be in Hamburg, Germany. And in 2024, we're actually going to San Juan, Puerto Rico. That's going to be an important meeting, particularly for you. You'll see in a slide or two why it's so important. But the whole idea is that we can't always afford to travel halfway around the world to go to an ICANN meeting in Singapore. I mean, and even ICANN staff don't get to go to every ICANN meeting. We go to the meetings in our region. You as a stakeholder have the opportunity to apply to be part of the fellowship program. And if you are selected, what happens is that ICANN will pay your airfare and your accommodation to attend an ICANN meeting. So I'll tell you how to do that in just a minute. But we have a similar program which is called the Next Gen program, Next Generation. And this is really for tertiary level students, for university students of the ages 18 to 30. When the ICANN meeting is taking place in your region, you are able, if you are a university student, to apply to go to that ICANN meeting under a separate program. And another way that we help persons get involved in ICANN is if you can afford to attend the ICANN meeting, we have a free newcomer program where you can attend sessions which tells you how the meeting operates, what is being discussed, how decisions are taken, and so on. So these are 3 ways in which you can actually participate in ICANN meetings. And this slide tells you how the funding works. I've already told you for the fellowship and Next Gen, ICANN will actually pay your airfare and your accommodation for attending the meeting. with the newcomer program, you can attend without paying any fee. So when it comes to public meetings, this is what the landscape looks like. Our last meeting was held in Washington, D.C., and it was what we referred to, the type of meeting that it was a policy forum. Our next meeting is going to be from the 21st to the 26th of October in Hamburg, Germany. That is our annual general meeting. Now, if you look at the bottom of this slide, you see that for ICANN 78, the meeting in Hamburg, the application program for the fellowship is already closed. And the announcement of who was selected as fellows was made all the way back in June, the 23rd of June, 2023. However, for ICANN 79, the meeting coming up from the 2nd to the 7th of March, 2024 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, which is close enough to the Caribbean, the application session is currently open. And when does it close? It's on the slide. When does the application for ICANN 78 close? I want you to tell me. I'm not going to tell you. What day does it close on? The 18th of August. What month are we in? We're in August. What date is it today? The 10th. Okay? So what am I trying to tell you without actually telling you? You have 8 days left to apply to the fellowship program. And you can see now that I was also a teacher, right, Simone? I don't want to think for them. I want them to read for themselves, and I want them to figure it out for themselves. But I will repeat now myself. The fellowship program application is currently open for ICANN 79, which is taking place in San Juan. Is there anybody here who thinks they might be interested in going to that ICANN meeting? Okay, Bevel, you can't go again. All right, Rudy, we're not letting you back in. All right, so I've seen a few hands. So there is an opportunity if you make this application and you can show that you will go to this ICANN meeting and bring something back home. You can show that you are already working. I'm with the ISOC chapter in St. Vincent. I helped Rodrigo and Albert to organize this Lakai Roadshow. I did an IGF, and I'm mobilizing the students. I'm mobilizing, like Chrislyn, the developers, and I'm talking to Nicholas about universal acceptance. These are all the things that I'm doing, and you really need to pay for me to go to an ICANN meeting. All you do is you make the case in your application. Don't mention my name, because I will see all of the applications that go in, and I will see that here's somebody, here's Chrislyn applying, for a fellowship, and she's from St. Vincent. Oh, I remember Chrislyn, yeah, she was part of the Lakai Roadshow. So I will get an opportunity to make my comments, and my Vice President Rodrigo also will have his opportunity. So make friends with him, make sure he remembers your name, so that when he sees it on the application, he'll remember, oh, yes, this person was at the Lakai Roadshow. So what I'm saying is that at ICANN, we try to open things up and make it as possible, for you to participate in the meetings. We know not everybody can just write a check or pull out a credit card and pay for a flight all the way to Hamburg, Germany. I've never been to Germany, all right? I don't even know if I'll be able to attend that ICANN meeting. I know Claire is going, all right, because she is in a leadership position within the ICANN community. So maybe you can work hard enough, Chrislyn, to see if you can get into a leadership position, and then you get to go to all the ICANN meetings and tell me what happened there, right? But the whole idea is that you have 8 days left to apply for the fellowship. Now, you told me the date that the fellowship application closes. Do you notice that there is also a time on there? Did you see that? 23:59 UTC. It's not like school, when you didn't do the homework and you miss the deadline, you go to the teacher 2 days after the deadline, and you say, Miss, the dog ate my homework, I didn't have electricity, can you still accept? It doesn't work like that. ICANN is very open, very transparent. You, the community, keep your eyes on us, so we have to do things properly. So Rudy, if your application goes in after this time on the 18th, sorry, we can't talk. And that goes as much for Rudy as it does for everybody else. So please, take a look at that. And this, don't worry and don't be fearful that this is a place where we speak in acronyms. ICANN tries to do as much as possible to prepare you for the meetings. We have something called Prep Week 2 weeks before the meeting, where we tell you, well, these are the important topics that are going to be discussed at an ICANN meeting. This is what's happening in this session. This is what goes on in a GAC meeting. This is what goes on in an at-large meeting. If you want to prepare yourself to attend a CCNSO meeting, the materials are available. You can actually go and read the documents and find out exactly how to prepare for the meeting. And this is the second to last slide that I have. It's about something that we call ICANN Learn, and it is simply a platform where you can find out about most topics under the sun in ICANN. It's a free platform. You don't have to pay for anything. You just set up what we call an ICANN account, because everything you do in ICANN requires that you have a free account set up within ICANN, because nowadays with the general data protection legislation, we need you to give us permission for us to send you things like newsletters and information on what's going on. So we can't just send you information just because we have your email address. But when you set up your ICANN account, there's a question, would you like us to send you our monthly newsletter? And once you say yes there, then we can send further information to you. And this is why it's important to set up your ICANN account. So you can go to ICANN Learn, learn.icann.org, and trust me, I think there are 1 or 2 people who have met who said that I think John Quill has put in an application, and one of the things that you were asked for in the application is what courses have you taken on ICANN Learn. So don't think, it's free money and free food, you just come and you can get to go to an ICANN meeting in Hamburg, Germany. Okay, you really have to show that you have put in the effort. You must have at least taken some basic courses. ICANN 101, what is ICANN? What is the DNS? There's some simple courses, and it's not all technical. Okay, it's not only for engineers, it's not only for technicians, it is for everybody who has an interest in what's happening with the internet. So, I didn't see anybody falling asleep, I'm surprised, but thank you for staying with me until the end of this particular session. I know I've gone over the tea break time, but this slide just shows a few places where you can get further information about ICANN. We are on all of the social media. These days I can't keep track. We used to say Twitter. What do we say now? It's called something else, right? There's no bird anymore. What's it called? X, okay? So you can check on X, and then we have all the different types of artificial intelligence, but these are the ones that we are on. You can find us on YouTube, so I guess YouTube must be old school, and Facebook must be old school. We are on Instagram, okay, not so old school. So you can find information on ICANN on all of these platforms. So thank you very much for staying through the course. We should have taken a break at 1:15, but if I see any hands go up quickly, I will take 1 or 2 questions, either for Rodrigo. I see 1 hand so far. Do I get a seconder? I see 2 hands. Okay, so we'll take 1 or 2 questions. If they're for Rodrigo, I'll just give him the mic. But let's go, my friend at the back. Let's say your question. Can we get a microphone? Is there a second microphone? Just 1 minute, because we have some online participants. So we need to make sure that we can hear you online. And one of the things that you will learn when you go to an ICANN meeting is whenever you take the microphone, the first thing, you don't just get up and start talking. The first thing you do is you identify yourself, you say your name, and then you say which organization you're from, or whether you're speaking on your behalf, so your own behalf. So I would say, my name is Albert Daniels, and I'm with ICANN, so that people understand the perspective from where you're coming, and they know how to respond to you. So, my friend, please tell us what's your name.
Yes, good morning, or good afternoon, whatever it is. My name is Lancelot Chapman, and I am here as the ECHO Director for Music Rights, which is the Eastern Caribbean Collective Organization for Music Rights. So, you were talking about ICANN's ability to collect people in one meeting to discuss particular issues. Well, at ECHO, we have a problem that we need the government legislative support. And apparently, we have to write the legislation and present it to the parliaments in the region, because we'd like a standard procedure for royalty collection and IP in the region, because there's too much fragmentation. So I'm asking the question, if the government part of ICANN, where you have these meetings, would that be advisable that I direct my board of directors and my staff in that direction to get involved with, be part of this ICANN initiative to get these people so we can lay our case to them? Would you advise that?
Okay, so here's the thing. We already said, as we saw coming from the Internet Governance Forum yesterday to today, that there are all of these different things that you want to do with your digital transformation, but they rest on top of the internet. So ICANN's role is and mission is very focused. ICANN's mission relates to the domain name system, the names and the numbers. And there have been some discussions which are outside of ICANN's remit, which have started filtering into the ICANN space for discussions. ICANN makes sure that the pipes are connected properly and that there is flow over those pipes. What flows over the pipes and the way that is structured in terms of content is not necessarily an area that ICANN gets into. And I will pass the mic to Rodrigo, who may also wish to make a comment on that. But an interesting thing about ICANN is that we have been so successful as an organization and as a community in facilitating multi-stakeholder discussions that the approach that we have been taking actually has been replicated in other organizations. So I don't know that music rights and the way you structure a regional approach for that is something that fits into the ICANN remit, but there may be certain aspects of the way ICANN operates and how it involves, for example, different types of stakeholders and how it can get these different stakeholders to work together that may be applicable to your situation. And I'll pass the mic to Rodrigo so that he can also make a comment.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you for your question. This is definitely one of the largest concerns on the agenda of the broader internet governance discussions. As Albert has mentioned, this is, for ICANN, this is a very narrow remit that has to do with the DNS and unique identifiers, but you know, many of the different topics around the internet, intellectual property and things like that, they have room for discussion in the different internet governance fora. For example, yesterday you held one here, of course with a national scope. That would be a good place to start. There is also the Caribbean IGF happening if you want to have a regional dimension on that. And these are not decision-making bodies, but in the room, the idea if you have multi-stakeholder discussion, you will find people from government. Perhaps within the government, you are lucky and find people dealing with intellectual property rights, also the different associations, organizations like the one you represent, and users, so that you together can come to a solution. Then I will guess there are also other international organizations dealing specifically with that topic, like WIPO and others that may be of any help.
Yeah, this one is mine.
Good morning, Swollen Duncan, representing ITSD.
ITSD.
ITSD. I have seen what ICANN does. I have a very big concern. Apparently, we have multi-stakeholder, to discuss everything. But there's something to me that is plaguing the world that is not being discussed, right? Apparently, we discuss on the numbers, the regulation of them. I wonder, for instance, if they're multi-stakeholder group to discuss, for instance, how bandwidth is packaged, sold, and resell. I think that's a very serious concern because what you find, for instance, the same provider would sell bandwidth at a rate in St. Vincent. They'd sell it at a different rate in Barbados. They sell it at a different rate in Jamaica. So, for instance, I've been to meetings and been to countries where I'm wondering, why is bandwidth so cheap here? You understand me? There was a time, for instance, we couldn't do TV over internet because you needed a minimum of 2 megabits or 5 or 10 or whatever to do it. You understand me? I think based on where the world is going and what the governments are trying to achieve, this discussion needs to be had, and everybody needs to have a part in it. Because we need to level the playing field where that is concerned. The ITU can't do it alone. I can't do it, and I can't do it alone. I see I have different forums for different people, but these very basic matters in terms of accessibility and affordability, we need to have those on the table too.
Okay. There are two parts to that. There are two parts to that comment and question. The first part has a lot to do with ICANN's remit and our areas of focus. But as I said, our areas of focus are very clear based on our bylaws, but there are certain things that are creeping into the discussion. But did I see you behave a little bit like Rudy and say that you have a concern about ICANN and point at me like this? No? I could have sworn you did that. Because if you had done that, what I would tell you is that if you want something to be discussed within ICANN, you go there and you raise it. It is bottoms up. Like I said, it's not Rodrigo, Albert, Nico who decide what is discussed at ICANN. We serve you. You are the ones in the multi-stakeholder model who will decide what is discussed. And if something is not discussed, don't point at me. I only work for the ICANN organization. And this is a key issue, and I'm happy you raised this question because this is just one example, but there's several things that could have been values and opportunities for the Caribbean, which the Caribbean has not been able to take advantage of. Why have they not been able to take advantage? Because we were not at the table. A decision has been taken, there are new GTLDs, there are none from the Caribbean. Why? Because the Caribbean wasn't part of the process, okay, to say, well, these fees that you're coming up with for this new program, they're not going to be practical for us in the Caribbean. This is our reality in the Caribbean, and we need to see how we can negotiate and come up with something that will work for us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and in the wider Caribbean. You have to be there in the meeting, remotely or in person, to make those kinds of inputs. And if you are not, guess what? The people who are there will actually be the ones making the decisions. And then you come and cry to me and point at me and say you have a concern about what's happening in ICANN. But very important that you raise that issue. We try in ICANN to stay very focused on our mission. We facilitate sometimes where there are related matters, the discussions, and so on. And as I said, to our colleague at the back from ECHO, there is a lot that can be learned in terms of the way things are progressed and the way policy is developed within ICANN that may be applicable to other areas. I have a question from this gentleman. Can we give him a mic? But put a timer on his mic, okay? We're only giving him like about 3 seconds or something to ask his question. A comment, okay.
We'll have to start with you, Albert, if we're going to time
limits.
No,
we're not going to break. We're talking for as long as the stakeholders want to talk.
Good morning, Bevel Wooding. Here, I'm going to respond and elaborate on that point which several had shown. Duncan raised an extremely important issue in terms of where do we go to really address the things that are hurting us in terms of achieving all of these digital dreams. I don't think there'll be any debate in the room about the power and potential of the internet or technology or broadband. The question across the region is how do we get those benefits at home? And the answer is a complicated one. So Albert made reference to the fact that ICANN has a specific remit, but then he also says, as stakeholders in the ICANN process, we can advocate for or press for certain kinds of changes in what ICANN discusses. That's a course that will take some time to get to the place where we're addressing our issues. The more practical approach that has been taken, because there is growing recognition that we're not tackling the real issues that making a real difference, is a degree of collaboration between both the internet organizations, ICANN, ARIN, LACNIC, these organizations that are dealing with the fundamental issues of network numbering, resource and autonomy, and the policy side of the equation, which is a Caribbean issue. And that's where the Caribbean Telecommunications Union has been working with the internet organizations and with the governments to see to what extent can we create different types of fora where you don't only have technology people talking to technology people, or regulators talking to regulators. But the places where the pain is being felt the most and the worst, having an opportunity to talk to the places where opportunity for change can actually take place. In practical terms, having your business people in the same room with your regulators, in the same room with your internet people, to look at specific areas where there are obstacles to Caribbean internet development. That hasn't been happening in a way that is needed for us to actually move the needle. But that's what we have been discussing, and that's where a lot of the shifting arrangement of these kinds of meetings is taking place. So at the end of this year in December, there's a gathering in Miami being planned where justice, business, technology, policy are going to sit together to look at the state of the Caribbean internet and have those kinds of what we're calling real talk. And not just talk sessions, but talk to action. So any decisions, and this is how we're shaping the forum, any decisions or any ideas or any discussions have to have a what's the action plan dimension to it. That's where we need to go. That's where we're planning to go. But we need more voices crying out that this thing is overdue. So I really appreciate the question. We understand the benefits of fora like this and like ICANN and ARIN can provide, but we also understand that there is an absent forum that we need to create, not just at a national level, but at a regional level. The reason ISPs can do things like different pricing in different countries is because there's a huge amount of ignorance about who is paying what where. But when you start seeing the fact that the same service running on the same subsea fiber is being sold in different territories at different rates, it creates the opportunity for a different debate or conversation with it, not just the ISPs, but with the regulators who are supposed to be monitoring it across the board. So I want us to understand it's not a simple case of let's just have a different meeting with different people, but let's also understand the underlying economics of why we are facing the kinds of impediments to change that we are facing so that we can break past those barriers and get to where we need to get to. Albert.
Thank you so much, Bevel. Okay, we will take one last question if I see any hands. Okay, Chrislyn.
Good morning. My name is Chrislyn, but I'm not asking this question on my behalf. I'm asking on behalf of somebody else. The question is, what role, if any, does ICANN play in the darknet?
Okay. Good question. The short answer is none. That's the short answer, to be very clear on that. To explain that more clearly, or we have to explain what is the darknet. The darknet is just a different network, not the internet, that normally uses internet infrastructure. Remember when Rodrigo explained it, that we have the table and we have the foots of the table that are the infrastructure, the stuff that we can touch, like cables or, okay? So this network, call it the dark network, uses that infrastructure for exchanging information, but it's not the internet, it's a different network. So you have to use different means to access to it, and it have different rules. Unfortunately, that network is widely known used by people not willing to do good things or good stuff, because it gives a lot of means to hide your activity in the network, and you know, if you are doing bad stuff, you don't want to be seen or to be detected, or at least you want it to be more difficult to do it. It's not impossible. Of course, there are many ways of finding someone, even if it's part of that network, not the internet. But again, it's not internet. It's a different network, just completely different network that uses the same infrastructure to exchange information. But I wouldn't recommend anyone getting into that network without knowing very well what you are doing, okay? And what I mean is not you're doing, you know very well what you are doing if you're doing bad stuff, right? I'm telling you that if you're curious, just read about it. Don't enter that network just because you're curious about what you can find there. Because once you enter that network, you're gonna be instantly hit by thousands of threats and attacks and whatever. And trust me, 99.9% of the people, it's not prepared to, not even to realize that they are under attack. So it's very likely that once you get into the network, the second you get into the network, your device will be captured and you're getting viruses, Trojans, all types of threats. So yeah, if you're just curious, don't go there. Just read about it, okay?
Thank you, Nicholas. Did you notice how the room just got quiet when Nicholas started speaking? Kristlyn, thank you very much for that question. And this is what I meant when I said Nicholas has flown all the way here from Uruguay. Use him while he's here. He doesn't come often. I don't know if the fact that he's wearing black has anything to do with the dark net, but he's here. All right, so he likes to dress in black. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention. We will now take a short break, and maybe we'll be back in about 10 minutes, and we continue with the rest of the morning. Thank you very much for your attention. We're going to be hearing from the gentleman in black who we heard from at the end of the session just before the break. And I'm speaking about Nicholas Antoniello. He is the Regional Technical Engagement Senior Manager at ICANN. As Regional Technical Engagement Senior Manager for the LAC region, Nicholas joined ICANN during March 2020. And the joke is on him because he joined in the middle of COVID. So he had never been to the ICANN office for months and months and months, even though he had been an ICANN staff member, because we couldn't move around at all, during COVID. Nicholas works in coordination with our other regional engagement functions at ICANN, and he leads the execution of our technical engagement strategy. Nicholas is an engineer who graduated from the University of the Republic, Montevideo, Uruguay, in the field of telecommunications, electronics, and energy systems. He also studied engineering at the Complutense University of Madrid, Spain, and internet governance at the Diplo Foundation, amongst others. In previous years, he has worked as advisor to the Minister of Government of Uruguay in charge of the National Telecommunications Policy. He also worked for the National Telecommunications Company, Anatel, from engineering the Network Operations Center to advisor to the Chief Executive Officer and the President of the company. For more than 14 years, he was a professor at the School of Engineering of the ORT University and the Institute of Electrical Engineering at the University of the Republic in Montevideo, Uruguay. He has been moderator of the LACNIC Public Policy Forum for more than 6 years, technical instructor in regional events for many years in the areas of the DNS, IPv6, and BGP, amongst others. So ladies and gentlemen, Nicholas will be talking to us today about universal acceptance. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
Thanks very much, Albert. This is too high for me, so I'm gonna move here. So I like to move when I present, so sorry. So if you were expecting me to stand there, that won't happen. I cannot be steady when I speak. It's an issue. So I'm gonna be turning back to see what's going on in the presentation. I'm not necessarily going to follow everything in the presentation. I don't like reading presentations, that's very boring. So maybe I change the explanation, but with the help of the presentation, you will be able, after this, to go back and at least have an idea of these topics and where to go to find more information, okay? So, topic for this session, universal acceptance. So we are going to go through what is universal acceptance, why it's important, why we think it's important, at least, and some things for you to consider depending if you are an end user. So what are the advantages of this that we call universal acceptance if you are an end user? What things you should consider if you are a developer, a software developer, and what things you should consider if you are a network administrator, specifically if you are in charge of administering email servers, okay? So universal acceptance has to do with the DNS, the domain name system. It has to do with developing applications, and it has to do with email services. Again, whether you are a user, a developer, or a network administrator, okay? And also it has to do with you if you are part of government, okay? And you take decisions, or you're part of a community that wants to keep some language history or script or whatever, okay? So, now we have only one screen, okay, fantastic. So, what is universal acceptance? First of all, and just because it seems to me now, I just realized that we may switch over the whole logical agenda, and we are talking about universal acceptance, but with didn't talk yet what the DNS is. So I'm going to just take like 1 or 2 minutes to recap on what is the DNS, okay? In case of some of you don't remember it, don't know it, or if you are technicians and you know what is the DNS, you're going to get very bored in the next 2 minutes, but then it's going to get interesting, okay? So what is the DNS? That's not in the presentation also. It's actually in the next presentation. What is the DNS? The domain name system, it's something that was created. It's from the technical point of view, it's an application. It's a service, okay? It's an application developed to translate names into numbers, okay? Names into numbers. Why translating names into numbers? And the example we use more to explain that is the telephone agenda, right? The agenda, the contact agenda of telephone numbers agenda, the directory, that's the word. Sorry for my, my native language is not English, so I often use not the perfect word for everything, but yeah, the telephone directory, that's the best example, you know, to do the parallelism between the telephone directory and the DNS, because the DNS is like the telephone directory for internet. So, let me ask you something. What if I ask any of you permission to get your phone and delete the whole telephone directory from your phone? Okay, you will say, no way, okay? And you're right, you shouldn't let me do that. But what if you say, okay, do it. Okay, I just steal one of the phones from here. So there's people from law enforcement here. Sorry about using that example. And delete all the only bad thing I do is I just delete the whole telephone directory from all of your phones in just a second, okay? The question is for you. Are you able to use the phone? Is the phone of any use for you if I delete and don't think about the smartphone and the possibility of using it for internet, because nowadays I know phones also can be used to speak, right? But that's the original function of the phone. Now it's a computer that can also speak. You can also use it as a phone. It's not longer a phone. But let's pretend it's just a phone. If I delete the directory, so does the phone stop working? No, the phone is still working, but you have to know the numbers in order to use it. Well, in internet, exactly the same thing happens. The DNS translates names into numbers. If you don't know the names, so if the DNS stops working, internet won't stop working. Internet will continue to work, even if there's no DNS at all. But no one will be able to use it, because no one remembers the IP addresses, which are the phone's equivalent on the internet. So each device in the internet has what we call an IP address, whether it is, there are two flavors of IPs. One is called IPv4, and the other protocol is called IPv6. Your device can have either of them or both of them at the same time. But in order for you to exchange information with any device on internet, you have to know the IP of that device. Normally, we do not remember IPs. Why? Because a long time ago, before the internet, before the telephony, at the beginning of the telephony era, someone realizes that the human brain, normally, this is not for everybody, but normally, for most people, including myself, of course, we don't remember numbers as well as we remember names. It's very easy for the brain to remember sequence of words. It's very hard for the brain to remember sequence of numbers. With IPv4, it's not that difficult. It's only a few numbers you have to remember. It's very difficult for me and for most people, but maybe some people say, okay, I can remember an IPv4, it's okay. Okay, with IPv6, it's not only the 9 numbers the 12 numbers, sorry, you have to remember in IPv4, you have to remember a lot more. And it's not decimal notation. So it's not from 0 to 9. It's from 0 to 9 plus A, B, C, D, E, F. So it's impossible for someone to remember an IPv6 address. Impossible. In practical terms, impossible. So you need something to translate names into numbers, the same as the telephone directory. And that's the DNS. That's when DNS was created. It was created for that. Let's assign names to the devices, not to the devices, but let's assign names to those IP addresses and let the people remember the names. And each time someone wants to connect to exchange information, speaking better, to exchange information with another device, it will have to know the name, that IP address that that device has assigned, and then go to the DNS and say, hey, I want to exchange information with www.nicolas.com. By the way, nicolas.com is not mine, I wish, but anyone. Anyway, before I was born, someone took it. No, not before I was born, because internet is not that old. But someone took it before I was. Yeah, Santa Claus took it for me, yeah. Yeah, I always say that I wish I have known about all of this before. I would have bought something like www.coca-cola.com and then sell it to Coca-Cola. Yes. And I won't be speaking with you. I won't be at the hotel in the beach, like lying back and enjoying the life in a different way. Anyway. Okay, so you want to exchange information with the www.nicolas.com, for example, accessing a web page I've created. You ask the DNS, and the DNS gets the name and answers with, okay, nicolas.com has this IP address, 1.2.3.4, for example, an IPv4 address, okay? And then you exchange information with that server, with that device. And that happens a lot of times while you are navigating the internet or accessing services that are available in the internet. So the DNS, it's used hundreds of billions of times a day by anyone in the world accessing any service on the internet. 99.99999, with a lot of nines after the comma, of the internet usage start with a DNS query. Actually, not with a single DNS query, with hundreds, sometimes it's dozens or hundreds of DNS queries while you normally use your computer, okay? That's happening in the back, so you don't see that, you don't have to do anything. The system will automatically do the DNS queries, get you answers, and connect to the different devices. For you, it's a perfect experience. You get the web page, you type the name, www.nicolas.com, and you get the web page. You don't care about what's happening behind, right? So that's the DNS. The DNS is the telephony directory for internet, the equivalent, okay? And it's important because of that, not because internet will stop working if it stops working, but internet won't be able to be of any use, okay? So it's what we call a critical service or application or resource. We don't want to call it critical resource, because critical resource for government is a different thing. It's like electricity, water, whatever, and this is not exactly that. So it's a critical application service in the internet, okay? That ICANN has a very important role, but it's not the only participant. It's not the one that controls the DNS. It's just one in a bunch of organizations and enterprises and users that make the whole thing work. Only that ICANN's role in the DNS, it's one of the most important in the DNS ecosystem. Okay, and we will see it later today why. Okay, but well, that's the DNS. So what's universal acceptance? The original. There's a standard for DNS, by the way. So at some point, a standardization body called IETF, which is under the ISOC, Internet Society umbrella, let's say. The IETF is a standardization body that does almost all the software, the logical layer that Rodrigo was talking about, all the protocols that are used at that layer, not at the foot of the table, but at the board of the table. All those protocols are developed by IETF, and with a similar process that the one that Rodrigo and Albert explained, the multi-stakeholder model. The IETF works with that model. Any of you can be part of a group that develops a protocol in the IETF. You just have to go to the IETF site, find the group you are willing to participate in, sign in with your email and your name, that's all. You're part of the standardization group of probably developing next protocol in some field, okay? The IETF was the creator of the one that standardized the DNS, okay? The creator of the standard for the DNS. That original standard only allows for names in English. Plain speaking, that's it. Original DNS protocol only allows for English names. So, what about myself, for instance? My name is Nicolás, but our native language is Spanish, so my name is not Nicolás in English, it's Nicolás in Spanish, without H and with an accent in the A. So it's Nicolás with an accent in the A. I cannot represent my name in the original DNS specification. I say, why? Why only English? I mean, there's a lot of people in the world that speaks other languages. Actually, English is not the most spoken language in the, you see, I'm a proof of that. It's not the most spoken language in the world, okay? There's more people that speak Spanish than English, for instance. Chinese, I think Chinese is the first one because there are a lot of people concentrated in one country, but a lot of people, then it comes Spanish, and then it comes English, and then there come the rest, okay? If you have a local language, right, or a local script, here in the islands, in the Caribbean islands, there are a lot of local different scripts. Why cannot you express the name you want to express in your own language? To preserve your history and your language for many, many reasons, to give more accessibility to the internet for people that only knows the local language, right? Why I have to learn English to use the internet? Why I cannot use it? Why I cannot access my country government services using my own language? Why? Why I cannot have nicolas@gmail.com with an accent in the A? I want that email address. So, there it comes, universal acceptance. Universal acceptance is like an extension to the DNS to add the possibility of doing that, to add the possibility of creating a name in the DNS that represents any word or any character or any glyph, as we call them, in any language. Potentially, you can express any glyph of any language, even those that are no longer used, like, I don't know, Sumerio or Latin, or, okay? You can even create names with those. You just have to go through the process of developing the ability to map those names into the DNS directory, okay? So that's universal acceptance, all right? And why does it matter? Well, okay, we've talked a lot already about why it matters, right? So it supports a diverse and multilingual internet. That's one of the bases of the internet creation. So anything that, foster or push forward that openness and inclusiveness, or inclusiveness, that's it. That inclusiveness, it's better, okay? Enable greater competition, innovation, and consumer choice. Why us end users or consumers cannot express in our local language or any language different than English. So this increases competition, increases opportunities, and consumer choices. Create business opportunities, of course, new opportunities, new names. You can have like operators of different domains that now can include other characters than only English ones, etc., okay? An advantage for developers and system administrators in terms of career to explore new ways of doing stuff or making sure that these things are working in the actual applications or in future applications. And we will talk a little bit about that in a minute. Assistant government policy makers in, reaching their citizens. Again, if you can only use English names, maybe someone that knows only for us, and it may be simpler because we are used to those characters because we write the same way. But let's pretend you are from old Egypt, use hieroglyphics, right? Or you are from China, or Japan, or Korea, that you have completely different symbols, and one symbol means many, many concepts. It's not one symbol mapping to one letter, right? So it's a completely different way of writing compared to us. If someone only knows hieroglyphics, won't be able to use the internet, right? So, but this gives a new way for governments to, they can still have their sites with English-like names, but they can also assign the local language name. So if people type either of them, they will be able to access, okay? So this gives a lot of opportunity. This is more of what we already talked. So the goal is a valid domain names, all valid domain names and email addresses should work in all software applications. Okay, so this is involving DNS, domain names, it's involving developers, and it's involving end users, and it's involving email administrators, and it's involving government and all the stakeholders, okay? Some, very fast, some fundamental aspects of universal acceptance. So what we basically do to adapt the DNS to be able to support these other glyphs is to create a method to do that, okay? And so we kind of encode glyphs. Something that is very interesting is you can develop a new protocol from scratch, completely different from the original one, that takes care of this possibility of adding new characters. The problem with that is if you create a new protocol, completely different, not compatible with the old one, you break what it's already working. So one of the very, very, very best practice in the standardization and standards developing, when you are developing protocols, is that you always try not to break what it's already working. So your new version of the protocol, you're not creating a new protocol, you're creating a new version of the protocol, or you are creating an add-on to the protocol, an additional protocol, is that it has to be compatible. So what is done by universal acceptance didn't change the DNS protocol. The DNS protocol continued to use only English words, let's say, or characters or glyphs. But what it does is to take any glyph in any language and create a code in English, in ASCII. What we call ASCII is basically the English glyphs in English that represents that, okay? So we say, okay, if I want to say Nicolas with an accent in the A, I will create something in English that represents the A with an accent. And for the DNS, that's gonna be, I will substitute the A with an accent with this code each time I need to use it. But for the end user, when the end user types, or when the end user see that on the screen, he or she will type the A with an accent, with the keyboard, because we'll have a different keyboard than the English people, I have a Spanish keyboard. No, I don't have a Spanish keyboard because ICANN is from the US and they send me the computer, so I have to remember where these things are in the keyboard. I just basically type without looking at the keyboard because there's an accent in there. And probably you do the same for many. And to transmit, in order to transmit those, to encode that and to put that into the DNS system, we use some standard called UTF-8. Okay, UTF-8 is just a version for representing and transmitting Unicode, okay? Blah, blah, blah. So this is the way that those new glyphs translate into the DNS and back to the glyph in order for reading or displaying that to the end user, okay? This is an example of an E with an accent. What universal acceptance also does in the standard is that there are many ways. Sometimes there are many ways to express, to write a glyph, and this is a challenge because in some localities or in some languages, the A, in the case of my name, the A with an accent, the accent goes right over the A. But it can also be written by A and then the accent, two separate characters. Could be one character, which is the A with the accent, or two separate characters, the A and then the accent. And they are the same. It doesn't matter if you write it one way or the other. So you have to take care of that in the DNS. So that's a part of the standard that we call normalization. So the first thing before going to the DNS actually, it's to normalize. So it doesn't care if the end user writes the A with the accent or the A and then the accent. The system will normalize, will take them both as the same, and will send a unique code to the DNS system, okay? So there's a unique code that actually represents different ways of writing the same thing. So this is getting more complicated in technical terms. For the end user, everything is transparent. You don't have to do anything. You just type in your own language, okay? So as we mentioned, internalized domain names is the capability, the ability for the DNS to use domain names that are not only ASCII characters, not only English words, okay? That under the, you see, this is not okay. You see at the bottom of when it says example, and then example minus XTA, and then XN minus example minus XTA. So what you normally will write or see in the screen is example, okay, with the A, with that symbol over the A that I don't know how to call it in English, the circumflex. Circumflex is in English? Okay. Yeah, circumflex, okay. The A, the A with the circumflex. But the last one is the one that is going to be handled and sent to the DNS system. So the last one, XN minus example minus XTA, is the coding for that, for example with an A with a circumflex, okay? Again, end user only sees the example written like that. The DNS only sees this representation, and everything works, okay? This is another example. We will skip it. There's two versions of the protocol for using in universal acceptance into applications. There are two protocols, one created in 2003, which is called IDNA 2003. Okay, so it's international IDNA. It's just yet another acronym. I hate acronyms, by the way. Internationalized domain names for applications. The A at the end is for applications. So it's how to apply internationalized domain names to applications. That's for developers. The first standard is 2003. The second one that was designed to replace the first one is 2008. And that's the one that every developer should be referring to nowadays. So no one that is creating new applications should base their applications in IDNA 2003, but in IDNA 2008, okay? And that specifies everything that you have to do, the capabilities or the abilities your application has to have or to have in order to be universal acceptance compliant, okay? In order to support universal acceptance in your application, okay? So, some considerations for email administrators, email server administrators. Again, if I'm used to administrate an email server, I know that email names, the mailboxes names, won't be only ASCII characters, okay? So we have to introduce universal acceptance into the email servers. So there's a task that has to be done prior to this by those who develop mail servers and mail clients. So the mail server is the box that handles all the mailboxes and handles all the email. That is, for example, if we take the Gmail service, email service, so Google administrates or Meta, I know how it's called, how's the name of, it's no longer Google, I mean the big company is called Alphabet, right? So Alphabet, which is former Google, operates the Gmail servers. And what's an email client? The email client is the one that we use in our computers in order to send and receive email. So there's a client in the user, and there's a server in the one that runs the service, okay? Both of them, the developer of the client and the developer of the server, need to include universal acceptance support prior to the possibility of us creating mailboxes using universalized names, okay? There's a table you can access. At the end of the presentation, there are a lot of links and useful documents that you can go through, and one of those have a table with most common email servers and most common email clients, and it will tell you if it does or does not support universal acceptance, okay? And more, the developers are trying to include in the new versions of the email servers and email clients the support for universal acceptance. So ideally in the future, in a near future, all common use servers and clients will support universal acceptance. But that's not the case at this point yet. Okay, so I'm gonna go very fast about this. You know that the email address, or you may not know, the email address has two parts. One before the @ and one after the @. So if my email from ICANN is nicolas.antoniello, which is my surname, @icann.org, okay? So there's a part that it's nicolas.antoniello, and there's a part that it's icann.org, and the @ separates the two parts. What are those two parts? Nicolas.antoniello. So the part that it's to the left of the @ it's what we call the mailbox, okay? And the part to the right of the @ is what we call the mail server, the domain, the mailing domain, okay? Think of that, doing the parallelism with the legacy mailing system. When we write a letter, we put it in an envelope and we send it, okay? The thing on the left, the mailbox, will be my street and maybe the number or the identification of my home, because there are many countries that don't have a street and a number in the identification. They use a different kind of identification, even the home that is close to the club, for example. That is the name in part, the part to the left. And then the part to the right of the @ it's the mail server provider, okay? So that would be, let's say, for the mailing example we were looking, that could be the country, okay? So I'm sending this to this person at Uruguay, for example, is where I live, okay? Or St. Vincent. So it will be nicolas.antoniello at St. Vincent. Okay? So once the envelope with the letter reach St. Vincent, reach the right part, someone will take care of the left part. So first you use the right part to send the email to the correct place, and then you use the left part to locally distribute the email, okay? Both of them must support universalized domain names. Actually, the domain, it's only the part to the right, okay? ICANN.org in the example I've mentioned. That's the domain. That has to be, need to have universal acceptance support in order to work. So, what does that mean? That the administrator of the ICANN.org server, email server, has to use a server version that supports universal acceptance. And then, to locally distribute mails, there has to be a possibility for anyone to create a mailbox with an internationalized domain, with a universal acceptance name, okay? So I can create Nicolas with an accent at ICANN.org, okay? And that also has to be built into the mail server and the client. So in this case, the client I use in my computer to send and receive emails need to have universal acceptance support, okay? So if you are an email administrator and you run an email server, you should go and check this IDNA 2008 standard, see the table, see if the server you are using supports universal acceptance, and develop universal acceptance. So turn on everything that has to be turned on and change the configuration so your server it's prepared to start using universal acceptance. And of course, you should recommend your clients to use this or this client, because only those will support universal acceptance, okay? So if they have a client that does not support, they will have to either change the client or they won't be able to use universalized names, okay? So that's for email server on client administrators or users, okay? We skip this, it's too technical. Okay. For developers, a slide on key stuff for developers. So if you develop an application, we recommend you start thinking about universal acceptance, and you make your application compatible or compliant with universal acceptance. What does that mean? This means that you have to use or may have to use different libraries. This is for developers. The developers use what they call libraries in order to build their applications. Libraries are normally pieces of code already done that they put together with their application, with their own code, and that in joint is what we normally call an application, okay? So if you are using libraries, you should make sure that your libraries can or support universal acceptance, okay? There are many common used stuff in programming that does not use universal acceptance. This part is gonna be very technical, only for developers, but for example, most applications that have a username, password access, okay, allow you to type a username or create a username, type or create a password. But most of the libraries that were built, at least in the past, does not support a name or a password, a username or a password, which is not ASCII characters. So again, name and passwords only in English. You have to change the libraries you are using for your naming and password stuff or your application in order to support universal acceptance. Other thing that normally developers do is that when I type the name, in order for making sure that the one that is typing is not making mistakes when it types, we use something called regular expressions to validate the username and the password. So the recommendation is never use regular expressions to validate usernames and passwords in your applications. Why? Because regular expressions are only ASCII by design. So you should use a library that supports universal acceptance, and that allows you to do that validation, okay? Those are the only two examples of a bunch of things that you should take into consideration in order for your application to support universal acceptance. Whether your application is an email server, an email client, or any application that someone needs to type something, okay? Because if someone types something in your application and your application does not support universal acceptance, that something basically won't work, okay? And what is more, it's gonna be displayed in a horrible way that you're not gonna even understand what you're typing because the display won't support universal acceptance, so you won't see what you want to see. So you think you're typing an A with an accent and you're seeing something very weird in the screen that is not the A with an accent, okay? In summary, universal acceptance is internationalized identifiers. We already talked about that at the beginning. Includes these new and longer TLD strings, includes dynamic lists of top-level domains and in general of domain names, but it basically is adding the possibility of representing any language in the DNS ecosystem, okay? There's some recap on some standardization stuff there. I would say that the important thing about what we already said is, what is universal acceptance? Why it's important? We already talked about both of that. That you need to know or keep in mind that if you are a developer, you need to, do some homework in order for your application to check that your application it's gonna work with this. Because let me tell you that if your application does not support universal acceptance and you at some point say, okay, I can, because that's the marvel of the internet. You can sell anything in the whole world without even moving from your home, okay? Guess what? You are not selling an application to China, which is by far the biggest market in the world, if your application does not allow for Chinese. That's as simple as that. So you create your very beautiful application that you cannot write in Chinese. Your username cannot be Chinese. Your password cannot have Chinese symbols. You are not selling anything to China. Same happens with Japan, with Spain, with anyone that writes or speaks in a different language, okay? So it's something that creates a huge opportunity for developers. And it's better, those of you that develop applications know that it's better to think about this at the beginning and not having to change the whole thing because you didn't take care of this at the beginning, okay? And for administrators of email servers or users that use an email client, you should consider starting using a client that, if you have the possibility, a client that already supports universal acceptance. And if you are running a server, ask the provider of the server, of the server application, does your software support universal acceptance? You have to upgrade to this version. Okay, send me the version. You upgrade the software. You test it, and you make sure that it's already prepared for universal acceptance. Okay, and if you are the government, you can say, okay, there's no standardization in the DNS system for our language. Why don't we, start talking with ICANN process that allows you to create these universalized domain names, or more broadly, universal acceptance for your language, and there's a whole process for that, and you end up having your language mapped into a way of putting those names into the DNS. Okay, so it's important for your people to, be able to use their own identity, their own language. Okay. And there's a lot of links here. You can go through those to get a lot of information, maybe more than you need ever, but it's already there. So that's all. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Now we're going to push a little bit because I want to get you out of here on time. Christine, you ready for it? So just to complete and add a very important part onto what you've just heard about universal acceptance from Nicholas, we are going to have one of your very own. She doesn't work for ICANN yet. All right, but Chrislyn is one of your local developers, and she's going to talk a little bit about the Universal Acceptance Ambassador Program that we have within ICANN. So I don't think it's going to be very long, but Chrislyn, you can go ahead. I'll give you the microphone. Yeah, sure.
Sorry for taking more time from you. I just wanted to add something to Nico's presentation on universal acceptance very quickly. So he stressed about the IDNs in general, which are international domain names in different scripts. But there is another dimension which was showed on the presentation, which is about the new GTLDs. So Albert made this distinction when he was talking about ICANN and the structure. You have the country code top-level domains, and then you have generic top-level domains. He showed us a map, a cloud map of the different new GTLDs. And there is another challenge for universal acceptance, which is not only accepting IDNs, right, or new scripts. It's also about system recognizing new GTLDs. Some of the programs or applications that exist, they only recognize the traditional GTLDs or generic, like .com, .erg, but there are some of the new ones that they were not included in these libraries that developers develop. So let's say you register your email address in a domain name with a new GTLD. Let's say someone, the next round of new GTLDs applied for the St.Vincent GTLD, right? Or any other city, or any for that matter. And you have your name at organization dot these new GTLD St.Vincent. But then you go on and try to book a flight, right? So you go into, let's say, American Airlines, you try to book it, and the American Airlines side doesn't recognize this new GTLD. It will say you have entered a wrong domain name or a wrong email address, because they don't recognize the new one. So the efforts of universal acceptance are not only about IDNs, but also it makes sense for English for the new GTLDs as well. Just wanted to add that bit.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. And now we'll hear from Chrislyn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I promise I won't be long. It's going to be very short. Okay, so thank you, Nicholas, for that very detailed explanation about universal acceptance. So what I want to talk to you about today is the Universal Acceptance Ambassador Program. So before we actually go into what the Ambassador Program is, I think it is important for us to know about the Universal Acceptance Steering Group, which is UASG. And the UASG is a volunteer-led initiative, and they are tasked with undertaking activities that effectively promote UA, which is universal acceptance, through its multiple working groups. One of those working groups is the Universal Acceptance Ambassadors. The group is made up of more than 500 individuals representing multiple organizations, businesses, and the ICANN community. And it is important to note that the UASG is supported and also funded by ICON. If you go to the ICON website, then there will be a lot of information there, right? So there's a link there for you to access whenever you are ready. Now, the universal acceptance, just a little bit more about it. They have there's a dedicated vision, mission, and also the impact that they are trying to achieve. And the vision is that all domain names, email addresses will work on all software applications. Their mission is to mobilize software application developers to get their products universal acceptance ready or UA ready by providing encouragement, documentation, case studies, tools, and measures to help provide user experience for a better user experience for the end users. And the impact is to promote customer choice, improve competition, and provide broader access to end users. So before we even get into being an ambassador, we need to understand what is the issue as to why do they need ambassadors. And one of the issues that the Universal Acceptance Steering Group is having is a lack of awareness, where people just simply don't know about what is UA and how to go about getting your applications UA ready. So after considering multiple options, the UASG, they identified several means of increasing awareness, and one of those is the creation of the Universal Acceptance Ambassadors, or the UA ambassadors. Now, the UA Ambassador Program has quite a bit of task. The ambassadors are appointed by the UASG, and the ambassadors are normally well-respected, articulate industry leaders who are encouraged and supported to raise issues of UA and also EAI in their respective regions. For example, in the Caribbean. If you do become a UA ambassador, then the program lasts for a period of 12 months that is renewable. And there are multiple opportunities that are available, which includes travel, networking, personal and professional development, knowledge sharing, and also cultural exchange. And I'm sure that there are other opportunities that we can think about. UA Ambassador, the UA Ambassador program, there is a budget, and the budget is $5,000 US, which is allocated to cover travel, accommodation, conferences, registration fees, and any other associated cost. If you're wondering, where do I get the material from to present? This is normally created by the UASG team, and you have that resource to capitalize on and use. However, you are obligated as an ambassador, as a UA ambassador, to provide quarterly reports to the UASG team, the USG is the group, on activities and also on results. Now, from our end here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as you realize that Nicholas just clearly outlined the importance of getting developers on board. From our end here, what we've done, we've taken the initiative to create what is called a Developers Forum. This Developers Forum is our first step in getting UA ready. And the Developers Forum is a collaboration of developers and also aspiring developers. At the moment, it is in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and they include software engineers, mobile app developers, website designers, and also students. The aim of the Developers Forum is to increase the collaboration and knowledge sharing among developers, of course. We'll also be providing community support. We have a WhatsApp group right now that we've started working with. We also want to equip developers with the knowledge, resource, and the tools needed to move forward with getting UA ready. And we'll be a resource pool for both the private and the public sector to be able to select developers from. That's it for my presentation.
Thank you so much, Chrislyn. And please give Chrislyn and the local developers a round of applause for taking that important step to organize themselves locally and actually establish a developers forum. I think, this is a very tangible outcome of the work that ICANN has been doing with Chrislyn and with the local developers, that they have now decided to actually establish this developers forum. And we can now look towards actually seeing the impact of that on businesses here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Okay, so we're going to continue to move quickly along. I'll talk a little bit about Dr. Claire Craig. I've known her for a long time with the organization named CARIBNOG, the Caribbean Network Operators Group. And eventually, I encouraged her to get involved a little bit in ICANN. And when she started on her ICANN journey, and this is important for those of you who know you have 8 days left, when she started on her ICANN journey, she applied to be an ICANN fellow. And she was selected as an ICANN fellow. How many meetings have you been to as an ICANN? It's in your slide. Okay, so she's telling me I'm doing her presentation, so she'll tell you all about that. So beyond that, she continued her journey. And she also has in her slide, I suspect, other areas in ICANN that she participated in. So in the interest of time, I was going to give Dr. Claire Craig a very big introduction, but in the interest of time, since she has everything on her slides, I would like you to give a very warm round of applause to my very good friend, Dr. Claire Craig, who will reintroduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone in the room, and hello to those who are online. Albert told me I have 5 minutes. I don't know how I'll do that in 5 minutes, but we'll see what happens. But let me just start by saying, the first time I applied for a fellowship, I was denied. So try and try again, okay? Okay, right. Not gonna go into all of that that's what I'm gonna talk about. Right, so Albert talked about the ACs and the SOs. I am part of an AC, which is ALAC, which is the At-Large Advisory Committee. So too, And he also spoke about the 5 regions. These are the regions: Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, and North America. We in Latin America and the Caribbean I'm not getting the, well, you're seeing it there dotted around. That's where we are, Latin America and the Caribbean. And normally, the ALAC is made up of 15 voting members. That's important to remember. And there are 3 members from each area in the region, 3 members from each of the 5 regions. 1 member is nominated or selected by the nominating committee, which is known as the NOMCOM, while 2 members are selected from the RALO, which is the Regional At-Large Association. Also, as part of the Regional At-Large Association, there is a chair and a secretary. I currently hold the position of secretary of LAC-RALO, which is more or less you attend the meetings, but you're not a voting member of the ALAC. So I can be part of the wider membership of ALAC, but I cannot vote. To participate in ALAC and the RALO, there are structures known as ALSs, or at-large associations, and ISOC is an ALS for St. Vincent. There can be many ALSs in a country. As long as you are an end-user society, you can apply to the ALAC, and the RALO will, now we're talking in these acronyms. LAC-RALO will send a recommendation to ALAC for the ALS to be a member. There are also individual members, but LAC-RALO is the only RALO for which individual members have not yet been completed. But you can still join as an individual member. However, you would be an observer. But it's in the process, and we're hoping that that should be finished shortly. Let me move along quickly to tell you about my process into ICANN. So my first fellowship was at ICANN 58 in Copenhagen, and that was in March 2017. That was a policy forum. I next went to the policy forum in Johannesburg as a fellow again in June of 2017. Now, each time you have to apply for the fellowships. And when you apply, they advise whether you have received it or not. I took a little time, I did not attend the AGM, I did not apply for a fellowship for that. And then my next fellowship was in Panama in June of 2018. Then you are only allowed to have 3 fellowships. But because of my participation in ICANN, I was selected as a mentor to other fellows, and I attended the meeting in 2019 in Kobe, Japan. After participating in the fellowship program, I decided to join the NCSG, which is the Non-Commercial Stakeholders Group. And as part of that group, I was also asked they were looking for volunteers to participate in ICANN 71 virtual meeting. So I volunteered, and I was part of a plenary session on the multi-stakeholder model within the internet governance ecosystem. So you could see, I don't know if you could see me from up there. I'm kind of in the middle, the only person of this hue. So I continue to participate, and again during the pandemic, let me just go back. Lac Rallo has a system where all the Rallos, there are elections every year for the board. But in Lac Rallo, there's a rotation for the areas within our region. The person from the Caribbean region who was elected to be the secretary was unable to continue, and I was asked if I would step into that position. That happened in May 2021. Even though I had been volunteering and participating in ICANN for all this time, I went into that blind. And I felt as if I was drinking from a fire hose for the last 2 years. I was usually at the AGM, that is when you are, what's the word? Accepted, you are appointed into the position. So I was appointed as secretary for Lac Rallo in October 2021, and I have served for the last almost 2 years. My term of office ends in October 2023, this year, at the upcoming AGM in Hamburg. However, I applied for a position of the, remember I told you there were these 5 regions, and each region has a NOMCOM representative. So the Latin America and the Caribbean region is now eligible for a position on the ALAC board, and I applied for the position for our region, and I was accepted. So in October in Hamburg, I will be appointed as the NOMCOM representative to the ALAC, and at which point I am going to now be able to vote. So that is where we are in the, so I am that one NOMCOM member for ALAC in Lac Rallo. Just, Albert would have told you about upcoming opportunities. So the next meeting is Hamburg, October 21st to 26th. Even though you may not apply, you can't at this point apply for a fellowship, but you could still attend meetings online. All meetings are hybrid. Albert also told you about the fellowship deadline. Please take it very seriously. I know there is one person who was accepted for Hamburg and will be attending that meeting. They applied for a fellowship, and again, Albert sent in a recommendation, and the person was selected. One thing Albert asked me to talk about, the reason I'm here today is because of the CROP program, which is the Community Outreach Regional Program. ICANN pays for different persons, and you don't have to be a member of leadership. Once you are part of your ALS, you can, and there is an opportunity to go and do outreach and engagement within your region. You can apply and be selected to attend. So these are some of the opportunities. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I know I took longer than I should have, but if you have any questions, please see me. Thank you. And looking forward to talking to you tomorrow in my other hat as Carib now.
Please, please, please give Claire much more applause, because she is a shining example for all of us on how you can start essentially at the bottom and take all of the steps, put in some work, and then get ICANN to support you at different levels. One of the things, I think Claire sped over it a little bit, was that when you are in a position, for example, as the secretary of Lac Rallo, for example, you basically have to attend every ICANN meeting. So you get funded as a funded traveler to go to every ICANN meeting. And the moral of the story there is, once you start working within the ICANN community, even though I said that it is a volunteer community, eventually the system supports you so that you can continue your participation. And we are really proud of Claire. Claire completed her PhD while she was on this journey, so it was 2 sets of work at the same time. Her PhD is in Internet Exchange Points as well. So she's here with you. She's a shining star. Please take the best advantage as you can of her. And she will be here for the Caribnog program tomorrow as well. Now, I see certain people giving me some very serious looks because we're trying to stay on time. Nicholas, how much time do you need? 10 minutes? Okay. So Nicholas will speak to us again just for about 10 minutes, and then we break for lunch. But people, please connect with Nicholas, connect with Claire, connect with Rodrigo. Rodrigo and Nicholas will be flying out, so they will not be with us for the whole day tomorrow. But please connect with them, and of course, connect with me so we can continue this dialogue.
Thanks, Albert. I was supposed to use a presentation, but I'm not using the presentation, so I'm doing the presentation in 10 minutes without the aid of a graphical presentation. Okay. This presentation was called like how internet really works and the DNS, right? And I'm gonna try to do this how internet works in 10 minutes. This is a challenge. Okay. I'm going to take from Rodrigo's table example on internet, okay? And I'm going to just unbuild the table a little bit. So Rodrigo first talked about the foots of the table, right? So the foots of the table are the infrastructure. Most things we can touch, let's say, okay? Cables, computers, fiber optics, all what we normally call hardware, right? And some stuff that we cannot touch, like a wireless network, okay? But that even if it's wireless, that's also infrastructure, okay? And then he talked about something that is more logical, simply because you cannot touch it, which is the board of the table, right? And that's built, let's say, over the infrastructure, right? And what it's how internet works? You first need the infrastructure. You always need infrastructure. So you always need a highway for the data to travel from one place to the other, okay? And that's the cables, the fiber optics, the wireless networks, whatever, okay? And then you need a bunch of protocols, okay, and a system in order for transporting or taking the data from one device to the other. So we normally said we connect to the internet. You know, the funny thing is that you can only say that you connect to the internet while you are not connected, okay? Because once you're connected, you're not connected to the internet. Because if you say we normally say that, okay? I'm including, but it's wrong. You're not connected to the internet as if the internet is another thing that you don't know anything about it and your device is just connected to it. That's wrong. Once you connect to the internet, you are part of the internet. Every device connected to that network we call internet. It's just another network, the biggest one ever, but a network. Anyway, every device connected to that network is part of the network. So when you connect, you become part of the internet, okay? Another thing that we normally say is that we upload things to the internet or download things from the internet, and that's again wrong, because if we take from the Rodrigo's example, the internet it's not over us, it's below. So we should say like download to upload and upload to download, but I don't mean to change your mind today about that, but take that into consideration, okay? So internet is not something that it's like God up at there. No, it's below. We build on top of it. It's not over us, it's under us, okay? Under the applications, under the services, okay? So, the foods, the infrastructure. Then we talked about the protocols. So the protocols is how the data is taken from one device to the other. So you have a lot of devices connected with fiber optics, wireless networks, cables, Ethernet cables, whatever means for physically taking data from one place to the other. And at a logical level, you need the procedures for doing that. That is what we normally call the routing protocols. So what are routing protocols in internet? Routing protocols are the ones in charge of taking the data from this device and taking the data all the way through the different paths between the devices to the destination. And then if the destination wants to answer something, take the data back to the original device, okay? Because you have many ways of going from one point to the other in a network like internet. You have many paths. It's like you driving across the city, okay? What do you use to know where to go if you don't know anything about the city? You probably nowadays use a GPS, right? WhatsApp or whatever application, which is basically a front end for a GPS service, okay? So it tells you where you are, it tells you all the paths, it calculates, finds the best path to follow, and then it sends you through that path. The same exact thing is what routing protocol does for internet, okay? They calculate the best way to reach the other device and then send the data through that path, or at least it tries to do it. That's the routing protocols. In order for routing protocols to work, you need some devices that make those calculations and send and receive the data that are called routers, in an extremely innovative name. So in order to route, you need routers, okay? And there are some other devices that we normally call switches or whatever, that they are used to interconnect all of those highways, all of those cables and stuff. They are interconnected by switches. So the switches interconnect infrastructure, then the routers route the information, okay? The routers use devices identifications to know how to locate any device in the network. Those identifiers are what we call IP addresses. So you will need an IP address, a unique IP address, okay, to assign to each device in order for you to be able to reach any device in a unique form, okay? So it's like the name of the device. So the routers know where are those IPs and send information that way for the information to reach the destination, okay? So they are like the GPS of the internet, actually. And we talked about the DNS. The DNS, it's a way of translating names into numbers. What numbers? The IP addresses, okay? We already talked about why we need the DNS, compare it, making the parallelism with the telephone directory. And the thing is that the DNS is created in a way that when you need to call someone, you go to your directory, you type the name of the person, and you get the number, okay? And you just click on the name, which has the number associated, and the telephone will call that person, right? Okay, but the one that searches for the information is you. You type the name of the person. The DNS doesn't work like that. The DNS has a further level of simplification for the end user. So each time the end user needs to know the IP associated with a name, what the user will do, instead of going and search in all the DNS database, the user will send the query, will tell a specific device within the DNS system that it's called resolver. I need to know the IP associated with www.icann.org, okay? And that device, the resolver, that device is the one that is going to do the search for you. So the resolver will start querying the different servers. In the DNS language, we call those servers the authoritative servers, because they are part of the database. They are the actual servers that holds the DNS data. So the resolver starts querying the different authoritative servers looking for the information. Once the resolver finds the information, finds the IP associated with the name you are looking for, it will give the response back to the user. So the user sends the query and waits. The resolvers do the work, find the answer by querying the different authoritative servers, get the answer, and give it back to the user. And then the user can go to the web page or to any services that they are willing to access, okay? So that's how the DNS really works. It has two kinds of devices. Resolvers search for the information, and authoritative servers hold the information. Okay, so the DNS database, let's say, it's formed by all the authoritative servers that have, all of them have small pieces of all the DNS information in the system. Okay, there's no single server with all the DNS information, so there's no single authoritative server with all the information, and there's also no single resolver. There are literally billions of resolvers in the world. And you can use any of them to do the search, because all of them do the exact same thing. They search for the information you want them to look at, okay? What does this mean? This means that if there are a lot of authoritative servers, and those authoritative servers are not controlled by only a single organization, but they are managed by different organizations, enterprises, end users, etc. Anyone basically willing to have a to administrate a domain, a piece of the DNS database can do that. There's no single organization that controls the DNS, as well as there's no single organization that controls internet. Because no one controls the internet alone, it's a joint task, and no one controls all the routers. Every ISP, every internet service provider in every city, in every country in the world, runs their own routers that are part of that network that we call internet, okay? So there's no a single person or power that can just go and shut down the internet. Just because it's not administrated by a single entity, and it's not, the information is not all in the same place. Of course, you can shut down a part of the internet. You can, if you are the government of a country, you have potentially the power of shutting down the internet for those who live in that country, but definitely you are not shutting down the internet. You're just shutting down your part. And of course, you can do that. You can always do that, right? It's like you're trying to shut all the doors of all the houses in the world. You cannot do it. But of course, you can shut down your house, okay? It's the same. So that was like a very, very fast and high-level overview on how internet works and what engineers and people that deals with that infrastructure at any level, like the logical, the physical one, or even the applications, developers, etc., all of them contribute for this whole thing that we call internet, which is a big network, probably the biggest network ever in the whole history. All of that, it's what we call internet, okay? And ICANN role, it's just a couple of tasks and responsibilities and role in that whole ecosystem, just a small piece of tasks and responsibilities. Among them, the managing the naming, the addresses. So all the IP addresses are globally managed by ICANN, who assigns them in pieces to the regional RIRs, to the regional registers, and then final end users and companies and anyone need for an IP to assign to a device will go to the local registry. In our region, it could be either, because the Caribbean is just divided in two, there are some that need to ask LACNIC for IP addresses or internet identifiers, let's say, and the others will have to ask ARIN, which is the one for North America. But ARIN is North America and part of the Caribbean, and LACNIC is Latin American and part of the Caribbean also, okay? And then, yeah, that's how more or less things work in the internet. And also ICANN has a responsibility, of course, with the DNS, because it manages what is called the root of the DNS. We are not going to get into details about that. That has to do with the architecture of the DNS. But the DNS it's not a flat naming system like the telephony system. The telephony system is flat. The DNS is hierarchical. So there's a hierarchy that is built one on the top of the of the other. In the DNS case, the highest hierarchy is at the top, and then it starts like a tree going down, and ICANN is the one in charge with the top of the DNS. Why it's important? Because if anything at that hierarchy fails, everything under that level will fail. So if ICANN manages the top of the DNS and the top of the DNS fails, all of the DNS fails. Okay? So it's a big responsibility within the DNS. But again, DNS is just the directory of the internet, okay? Not more, not less, okay? And again, ICANN has another role, that is all the policy making, all the policies needed for administrating those names and numbers are also built by processes that ICANN handles, let's say, okay? So that's how internet works. I hope it makes some sense, and I will give you the presentation in case you want to, go more deeply into that. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for that abbreviated presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope the time that we've spent with you this morning has given you a sense, a deeper sense, for those of you who didn't know what ICANN was, of what we do at ICANN. I hope you have the appreciation that you are more important in ICANN than the staff members. You are the ones who really make ICANN. And I hope you understand that you can reach out to any one of us. Nicholas will be presenting tomorrow. I'm going to ask Bevel to come up and speak for 30 seconds about tomorrow. I did WhatsApp him. I hope he read his WhatsApp. So this brings us officially to the end of today's program. We will be, well, except for lunch, which is outside, we will be providing you with all of the slides that we used, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow for the technical forum, where we will be collaborating with Caribnog, and I'll give Bevel 30 seconds to talk a little bit about Caribnog before he gives the mic back to me quickly.
Time it. Tomorrow, Friday, the 11th of August, we'll be having a special Caribbean Network Operators Group meeting. We call it a technical forum, where we're going to be going in depth into some of the issues around internet exchange points and cybersecurity and those kinds of matters dealing with our technical community. Those people who want to get in depth behind the scenes or behind the curtain as to what's happening on the Caribbean landscape in the area of Caribbean networking. The tagline for Caribnog is networking for the greater good. And so it's a place where we share ideas, share experiences, and share knowledge for everyone.
So it's not too late to register. Let your colleagues know. So we'll be here tomorrow. So please give a very warm round of applause to Nicholas, to Rodrigo, to Claire, to Chrislyn. And we have officially ended. Please proceed to lunch at the back.
Just a comment to all, if you want to contact us, you can send us an email. I say, that's easy, but I don't know your email. No, it's not a trick. All ICANN emails, and this is done on purpose, are name.surname@icann.org. So you just have to find out our name and surname, and just name.surname@icann.org, and you can just send us an email. Okay, and our names will be in all the presentations, so it will be very easy for you to send an email. And feel free to send an email about anything that we've talked today, or anything that you will want to know about within ICANN Remit, to any of us. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.